then got too used to the, you had to give them, they actually have one where it's like real time for 3 hours. Yeah. And they had the sound. Okay. Wow. And if you have a preference for that you don't want to speak to, you could get one of their.
Wait, sorry.
Sat there and did that. Somebody did. It's not like you pay for it, so I don't know. It's not like there's advertising on it, so somebody just decided that was a good use of their time. And I was somebody. So I shouldn't complain.
Oh, you're on top of it. Thank you.
Well,
It's okay.
it's not hard.
There you go.
It's toasty. Yes.
So we have two things. And what is the next one right after? City manager? Good. Have a copy of the... Is it good?
Yeah.
Looks good to me. Cool. Thank you, Carter. Yep. Well, just realized I didn't bring that. Oh, wait, no, I did. Thank you.
Well, I have a lot of good neighbors, so I'm going to have to keep my investigation going. With a minute to spare, Councilmember Questa, how are you doing?
I didn't feel like it was that much. I'm doing well, thank you. So,
Good planning.
Nice timing. Welcome, everyone, to the Inglewood City Council study session of January the 28th. It's 6 o'clock, and all council members are seated. Our first agenda item tonight is the Inglewood Environmental Foundation Audit RFP discussion in the opening of the bid responses. Thank you for being here.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. Before I begin, I'd like to introduce Eva Boyd. She is our Procurement Administrator, and she is the individual responsible for opening up all bid proposals, and so she has brought the sealed bids with her today. The purpose of today's discussion is to open the bids. She'll talk, I think she will disclose the cost of each bid, and as she normally does, and then to distribute copies. Tonight, we will not be discussing the proposals themselves. We will come back on February 11th to actually review and select those individuals or the firms that you'd like to interview at a date yet to be determined. So with that, I'll ask Eva to open up the bids, and you'll name the vendor.
Yes.
And also the cost.
Yes. So, hello, everyone. So, this is the bid opening for a RFP 18-45, which is Englewood Environmental Foundation audit. We have received 5 bids. When I do open the bids, please be patient because sometimes they're really hard to open. Sometimes they list the cost on the front page, sometimes on the last page. So let's start. So the first bid is from Colorado Independent Consultant Networks. Yeah, sometimes they are very wrapped really securely. So the first bid, like I said, it's from Colorado Independent Consultant Networks, and the total bid is $36,420. I don't see any exceptions. So that's the price. They did give us copies, so I'll leave them with you. I'm gonna take one because I need to keep one.
And we'll pass out the copies that we have from the vendors immediately following this discussion. If we don't have all the copies, Eva will make them and we'll bring them back to you.
The second bid is from Marsh Minnick. And the total bid is $36,312.50. The third bid is from E.D. Bailey. It spells E-I-D-E-B-A-I-L-L-Y. And the total bid price is $49,400. Actually, they gave us a range. I don't know how we're gonna handle that. They gave us a range from $49,400 to $73,340, not to exceed $73,340.
Okay.
I don't see any other exceptions. Next bid is from BKD CPA Advisors. They also gave us a range, $28,000 to $46,000. No exceptions.
What's the range?
The range is 28,000 to 46,000.
46.
Yes.
And just as a point of information, we are going to get a copy of all of these, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, we asked for all these copies, and like Maria said, if they didn't provide enough copies, I'll go upstairs and make some copies for you.
Okay, thank you.
And the last bid is from Marticons. It spells Martcons. And the total bid price is $52,500. And I believe the second package is just copies. They're just copies. And that concludes the bid opening for this project.
Okay, so it appears that we have enough copies for each council member, so I will pass those out. But before we move on to the next item, I wanted to let you know that in the memo that I provided to you for tonight's discussion, I included some criteria that you may consider in your evaluation. It's on the first and second page. It's based on the information that was provided in the RFP. So that's information that you can use in addition to your own evaluations for your discussion on February 11th at the next study session. Okay? So with that, we will pass out copies of each of the proposals. Okay.
Great, thank you. Are there any questions? Councilmember Questa.
Thank you, Mayor. This is the first time I've been present for an opening of RFPs. Why did we do it in that manner this time as opposed to not having done that ever in the past?
Yes, it's the first time I've been through this as well. So perhaps our city manager or city attorney could explain why we did it, why we chose to do it this way. It was our understanding from the consensus of council that they wanted to make every effort to make this as open and transparent to the public, and that there would be absolutely no question that the audit proposals were complete. So that was our reason for taking your time.
Good, thank you.
Any other questions? Is the process clear to everyone of what we're doing? We're going to be reviewing all of these on our own, coming back and talking through the criteria that we think are most important for what we're intending, and pick our top, second, third choice. So my question is, would you like to agree upon criteria ahead of time? Do you want to use the list, which you're suggesting starts with page 2, Ms. Sabata, right? And starting with the review, purchasing, and accounts?
So on, if I can address the council, on the
Yes.
First page of the memo, in the analysis section, there are items that were required to be part of the RFP, and I also provided you with some preferred, in addition to the required, of the types of things you may want to look for. They're just suggestions. So it's in the memo itself.
Great.
And then if you review the RFP too, you might have some other things that you consider more favorable than another on your own that you might want to consider.
Councilmember Valentine.
Yes, I'd like to have a chance to go through the proposals and comparison to what the RFP was put out and how they handled it before we discuss if we would adopt any of these suggestions or not, and then obviously have a chance to look at your suggestions a little bit more in comparison to what we've received.
Are you finished? Thank you. Anyone else? Oh, Mayor Pro Tem?
One question I have, I noticed in here
that, and I think it's under the preferred, it talks about their looking for broader market compliance with management policies and procedures. And we haven't come forward with the policies manual, so how are they going to determine whether there's any fraud or not? Is it because we have a current standing policy, procurement policy manual? Do you understand what I'm asking?
I think so. You're asking if we, because we don't have specific policies related to EAF.
Well, even to the city. I mean, I've been under the understanding that the procurement policy manual is going to come forward. It was supposed to be, I think, this weekend, it got moved.
If I may, we are certainly reviewing the procurement policy, but we have a policy in place that we think agrees with charter. So it would be that policy up until the point that it might be changed with your approval, that any audit firm would compare our past practices to.
Okay, so it's the policies that already are in.
Correct, and have been in place,
Okay.
yes.
All right, thank you. Thank you. Any other questions, comments? So I guess be looking at this and then looking through the different criteria that are on there. I think maybe what, I'll bet Councilmember Wink would love to help with this. We might put those into a grid, and you can just sort of give comments if you want on what they are to help guide your thinking as you read them, but we've not been one who's used numbers or anything, but I think we might be able to provide something like that for you to just keep track of your notes if you want. If you don't want to use it, you don't have to. So we'll produce something like that within the week. Any other? All right, thank you very much. Appreciate your both coming, and nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well. Thank you.
Next up is our comprehensive plan discussion. Director Brad Power and Planner 2, John Voberall, are here to present a brief council, on development of the comprehensive plan neighborhood assessment process. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here, and Mr. Holder's here as well. And with only one mic and three of you, we got to make sure we
will pass it around
have you pass
accordingly.
it. Great. You sound really nice and clear right now.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. We wanted to come tonight and talk to you about our comprehensive plan land use intensity map that we formulated as a result of the adoption of the comprehensive plan almost 2 years ago. And Wade Burkholder, our planning manager, and John Voberall, our planner, are here to go into a little bit further depth, but I wanted to begin the presentation tonight with our conclusion. One of the things that we wanted to make sure that you and the community understood is that when the comprehensive plan was adopted by the City Council, as I mentioned earlier, almost 2 years ago, the plan had it did have 13 neighborhood assessment maps that were adopted as part of the comprehensive plan. And as we started to kind of become more comfortable with the plan's existence and kind of what was in the plan and the elements and the framework of the plan and how it was put together, we had several citizen inquiries from people who said, where's the overall compendium of how it looks in total? And so we embarked on an endeavor in the spring of last year based on those requests of pulling together a compilation map that summarized all those 13 other maps. And so I will conclude by saying what this is not. We did not intend this map to be an amendment of the comprehensive plan. Again, it's a compilation of what is already in there, nor does it change anything related to the underlying zoning of those districts. John and Wade will go into more detail, but this comprehensive plan is intended, again, to be an approximately 20-year look into the future relative to the potential growth patterns in Englewood. Now, we can't, to a block level, predict what's going to happen over those 20 years because markets will change and things will change over time, and council's priorities will change over that period of time as well. It's intended to reflect what was adopted at the time, that the community provided input, the Planning and Zoning Commission provided the input, and ultimately the City Council adopted the comprehensive plan. So with that, I'll turn it over to these two gentlemen for further discussion.
Good evening, Mayor Olson and members of council. I just wanted to give you a brief background in what your comprehensive plan is. The comprehensive plan, as in all jurisdictions, is an advisory document. It's an advisory document to inform you when reviewing your regulatory applications for rezonings, for subdivisions, and those sorts of procedures. This is not a regulatory document, but it is set out to advise you on all things going on with the city, land use being one of them, but it also advises you on transportation and capital projects, housing, it can be used for infrastructure, and on and on and on. So it's a overarching policy document for the city to use when discussing issues, reviewing applications, and those sorts of things. And the Englewood Comprehensive Plan incorporates several other plans, the walk and wheel plan, the light rail study, as well as the overall goals and objectives for all those individual elements, such as transportation, land use, et cetera, and so forth, that I mentioned for the community. So as you look at this comprehensive plan, think of it as your policy guidance, your document you can use when reviewing land use or any other issues within the city. So that's a real brief overview of the comprehensive plan, and I'll turn it over to John.
All right, so my job tonight is to give you a little bit of the backstory of how these neighborhood assessment maps were created, and also hopefully give you a little bit of an idea of what some of these areas might mean in terms of policy initiatives. The planning consultant Logan Simpson suggested dividing the city into neighborhoods in order to better direct targeted policies and desired specific character for each neighborhood. So they started off with identifying commercial core neighborhoods first. So there are 4 primarily commercial neighborhoods in the city, and they include the downtown Englewood Station, the Medical District, Oxford Station, and the South Platte River area. Those are followed by the first ring of residential neighborhoods. Those include 4 neighborhoods including Cushing Park, Bates Logan Park, Jason Park, and South Broadway Heights. And those are followed by a second ring of residential neighborhoods, 4 different neighborhoods again: Baker Park, Romans Park, Bellevue Park, Brook Ridge, and Duncan Park. So after they identified the boundaries of those 13 neighborhoods, the next step of the process was to do a computerized area of change analysis. And so they created a model using the citywide GIS land parcel layer file and county assessor database to create a model of change. And the inputs of those that went into that model include the following: underutilized parcels with low ratios of land valuation to building valuation, vacant parcels, age of parcel building structure, proximity to major roadway intersections, proximity to light rail stations, and finally, proximity to locations with recent development activity. From that computerized model was generated a series of different categories of land use change, including low, moderate, and high potential change areas. So then the consultant took that, the model map, and then began composing individual maps for each of the 13 neighborhoods. So this is a little bit of science and a little bit of art as well. Typically in these neighborhood assessment maps, you'll start off with the catalytic activity areas, and those are in red. And those are high areas for potential change. They're typically commercial zones located along the Broadway corridor, the US 285 corridor, downtown, and Medical District. Those are followed up closely by neighboring mixed-use transition areas. These are moderate potential areas of change. They cover mostly mixed-use zone districts, which allow a strong mix, a wide mix of residential uses from single-family all the way to multifamily, as well as limited office uses. Then that is followed by the residential transition areas. These are identified as moderate potential change areas. They include most R2 zone districts, as well as portions of the R1C zone districts as well, that are in close proximity to the Central Business District and the Broadway corridor. And finally, we have areas of stability which have low potential change, and these are located fairly distant from those major corridors or those major central business districts. The draft maps were then presented to and analyzed by the Planning and Zoning Commission in over a course of 4 study sessions. And the Planning and Zoning Commission gave us some good feedback on how to make some adjustments to some of the boundaries of these zones. Then they were ready to go out to the public, and we presented these draft maps to the public at Neighborhood Park Comprehensive Plan meetings that took place in July of 2015. The composite comprehensive plan land use intensity map brings all of the 13 neighborhood maps in the comprehensive plan together in a single map. The composite map was created in March of 2018 based off of what Brad said, inquiries from citizens. And the citizens were mostly interested in those potential residential transition areas. So I'd just like to kind of give you a little bit of a flavor of what the comprehensive plan talks about in terms of policy initiatives and mix for those areas. It talks about single unit detached residential replacement housing units. It also talks about selective single unit attached townhome residential housing units in selective areas or portions of those areas, of those residential transition areas. It also talks about accessory dwelling units, small and urban lot development standard reforms, historical preservation incentives, and finally, stronger residential design standards. And I'd just like to call attention to a planned unit development that is located in one of these areas that was approved in 2014, Logan Street Residences, PUD, at the corner of Logan and Floyd. Incorporates many of those same policy initiatives that I just mentioned. The Logan Street Residence PUD included a rehab of a historical church building into 2 single-unit attached townhome units. It included 2 new single-unit attached homes on small lots. It included 1 rehabbed single-unit attached home on an urban lot. It included 3 carriage house accessory dwelling units, and it also incorporated traditional neighborhood design character featuring front porches, gabled and hip roof lines, dormers, and upper story setbacks. And this concludes our initial presentation to council, and we would like to now invite council questions on the neighborhood assessment areas, and as well as feedback amongst yourselves as to your perspectives on these neighborhood assessment areas.
Thank you, gentlemen. Questions or comments? Mr. Councilmember Sierra.
I'll start off with 2 questions. So I guess I'm still a little bit confused on what's the ultimate goal of the comprehensive map? I know you said it was an advisory document, but what is it that we're supposed to take out of it?
This kind of gives you, I think, an idea of where the city will probably go in terms of market, potential for change. You're going to have in England, where we're going to have the most intensive change pressures are going to be in our downtown district and our medical district because they are zoned for that kind of activity. Also, we would like to see some changes along the Broadway corridor. But as you get farther away from those areas, the potential change will be different. And it's expected to take a much different form, a much less dense type of form.
Can't reach the...
Director Power.
In terms of the comprehensive plan in general, I would say that most communities identify their comprehensive plan as a vision for the development of the community over the course of a long period of time. And so one of the things that we'll allude to in the next item about impact fees is one of the things that you want to try to identify are those areas in the community that could change and where you could start to forecast where your capital needs would be, where additional facilities would be. But if you look at Englewood's comprehensive plan, it's really built around several themes, in addition to just the physical locations of development. And so one of the things is to establish that kind of overall vision for the community, but it's very important to also understand what the comprehensive plan offers, which is at a minimum every 5 years, the city council goes through some type of community engagement process to judge where you are on the spectrum of, is it in the right place? Is it in the right place relative to what's going on in terms of the development of the community or lack thereof? Because all of this is subject to both the market and real estate cycles. And so it's hard to sit here tonight and say, that's the city in 20 years. It could look much different based on where the market goes and also where future councils want to direct in terms of the overall growth pattern, the priority of development projects. Dan Paremba and I have spent and will continue to spend considerable time with you talking about the city center area. And that's just this, the big red square on the west side of the core area of the city is that area that could undergo some pretty significant change. We hope sooner rather than later because this has enormous redevelopment potential for the community. And that's the kind of thing that we look at the comprehensive plan, you look at the comprehensive plan, folks who are thinking of investing in this community look at it as kind of the roadmap and the vision for the community. As John mentioned earlier, you didn't adopt this by ordinance, you adopted it by resolution. And I think there's an important distinction in that this is not cast in stone. And we do have in our work plan that 5-year update and taking that very seriously as we go through it, that you and the community can weigh in on the overall goals of the plan and we'll judge whether or not we're on the right track or not.
And I guess my second question, and I'll try not to be long-winded on this, but you said it's not a zoning change, but it does look to be, when I first saw the comprehensive plan, it did look like it was an official document where the city, of a decision that the city may have made, right? So I guess I guess what I'm trying to say in terms of just identifying what the plan of this this map is anybody using it to see what type of changes Inglewood should be making? Like in terms of developers or, do you see where I'm coming from? That whose input, which input did we get in order for us to kind of realize what we may be 5, 10, 20 years from now?
I believe that developers do take a look at the city's comprehensive plans. They don't want to waste their time or your time, so they do look at that pretty closely. I believe that they would be probably looking at Oxford Station pretty closely, what your policies there are, as well as your Inglewood downtown and the medical district. In terms of smaller developers in residential areas, they also obviously want to know what the zoning is, but they're going to wait until they get more definition from the community before they make moves. Zoning changes will come from small area planning processes. As like Brad said, that we have these categories of land use, but there's not a set policy that's been identified for each one of them. There's been a mix of different policies that could be chosen by the community and city council to be applied in different areas. And we haven't done that yet. That's another new step. You develop a comprehensive plan and then you start focusing more down into smaller areas to figure out exactly what you want to see in that area.
Thank you.
Councilmember Martinez.
I have 3 really quick questions. When are we scheduled to review the comp plan next? It feels like we did it not too long ago, and we're doing it once per year. I know you said there's a big review every 5 years, but we're going to check in on it once a year. Is that correct?
Yes, the last time I believe I was in front of you was in the 4th quarter of last year, but part of the problem with that was that there was a lot of statistics that were kind of a little stale, and we were waiting for some updates, and those did come in December. And so I would like to start working on getting prepared for you to have another check-in with an update, lots of updated statistics about where we're at right now.
Okay, great. And then when we do that next review, could we have, and thanks for putting this map together, by the way, I think it's really helpful view-wise. Can we incorporate this map when we do a review to see if the areas of change that we are seeing happening are still in line with kind of what we planned on this map?
Yes, I think we can do that.
Okay. I think that'll help big picture-wise to see that, what we thought, for 20 years is still accurate. So I think for me that would be helpful. And then is this map also included on our website where the rest of the comprehensive plan information is? And if not, can we just add it in there somewhere?
Yes, we can do that.
Okay, thank you.
Is that all three?
Yes.
Councilmember Valentine.
I have a couple of statements and then a couple of questions. I want to preface this a little bit with some information, or at least my understanding, and then you can clarify it if you believe that that's inaccurate. The charter lays out pretty clearly how the comprehensive plan is done and calls it a land use document so that people know what they're buying into, and is generally does the zoning. And I believe that you accurately described that planning and zoning has to do the comprehensive plan, then it comes to council. We did a public hearing on it. There's meetings, we spent money on consultants. It was over a several-year process. I have some concern about it continually being referred to as a advisory document because when we're talking about land use, and have a little bit of concern that the council is taking an active step to relook it over every year, even 5 years, because that tends to make people who are going to do investment on a longer term basis a little nervous, I believe. On one end, makes some people a little nervous that they don't have the long-term commitment from the government that what that land use is going to remain. On the other hand, the way that this ends up going is we open the door to that we have more of a attitude, or what's happened is that more of an attitude of they'll present to us and we'll change the zoning depending on what somebody brings to us rather than what our zoning is. So I look at it a little bit more than an advisory document, and I think so do the developers. And that's generally why when they come to us, they say, it's in your comprehensive plan. I do have a little bit of a concern. While the developers may look at zoning, what we've had coming before us is looking more at these transitional kind of things, these other documents that somehow we're, and I think that's part of the problem with this plethora of PUDs and rezoning it instead of having a land use document that is more governing, a little bit more solid, gives a little bit more stability. You list this neighborhood plan that the purpose of the maps is to geographically give an idea of the future geographical distribution of land use, desired neighborhood character, and level of intensity. And I think that sometimes that suggestions of here's what we're looking for in the future, when it's in conflict, what's currently in zoning is creating some of the conflict in there. To council members, Sierra's question, I have a little bit of a problem with this, making it as if this document now is becoming part of the comprehensive plan, because I do think that there is some contradiction in there. I mean, you have a plan, and then, like you said, the purpose of these maps, though, is to give an idea of future stuff that we might consider, that we might do, and I'm not sure that that's where that belongs, is in that document. So could you address that a little bit?
What is the specific question?
If the comprehensive plan, even in your own words, is only an advisory document, and the maps are yet another advisory document that are giving an idea of what we would accept in the future, apparently that aren't even in the comprehensive plan, then they seem to be a little bit of a conflict. So why would we want to incorporate them both in the same?
The only thing I could say is that this map here is the exact composite of all the 13 neighborhood assessment maps. There's in the comprehensive plan that was reviewed by the Planning and Zoning Commission, that was approved in public hearings by the Planning and Zoning Commission, and it's also studied in multiple study sessions by council and adopted by council. So it is exactly the same as what you have in your comprehensive plan.
Actually, according to what you wrote down, it isn't the same as what's in the comprehensive plan. It's the potential of what we might expect in the future. And so, like I said, I do think that there is a little bit of conflict there, and I think that that shows with some of the presentations that come to us from developers, that they're confused, that they think that this is some, whatever they're proposing is something we're going to go for because we've got this kind of mush in our comprehensive plan that seems to disregard the zoning that's in the area. So those are my only comments.
Councilmember Wink, you had yours up. You've taken it down. You want Councilmember Questies ready too?
Thank you. I was going to make the comment too that my understanding was that this was really an aggregation. It's an aggregate of the pieces that were in the comp plan because certain citizens were seeing a portion of the city and turning a few pages and looking at another portion of the city. And so our department kindly put it all together, all of the pieces as they were in the comprehensive plan into one view so that we could look at it all together. So I didn't understand that there was any change in content here, and I just don't want us to get lost over words. My understanding is that this is the exact same content as is portrayed in the sectioned maps within the comprehensive plan document. Am I right?
You are correct.
Thank you.
Councilmember Questa.
And point taken there, I understand that there's no new material in front of us. And I do think this is going to be an ongoing conversation as development continues to be. And, you know, I certainly understand this is advisory. I do think that there's some folks that might read this as unspoken encouragement that we're saying these are the areas that you should target if you're looking for redevelopment. Do you think that is an unfair read on that?
I don't necessarily do think that's an unfair read. I think if you look at the areas that we have experienced in my short time here, in an unprecedented real estate expansion cycle, a lot of those areas, particularly in red, have been the focus of a lot of the redevelopment in this community, especially those of larger scale. When you look in that central core of the city, we have the Kmart site down south, the Foundry up north, and those are all in those areas that have labeled that. And so I don't think that's an unfair conclusion to make. The question is what's happening in some of those other areas in terms of the pace of change in some of the neighborhoods. And that's a very difficult distinction to make between ensuring people have the market rights under our current zoning to do what they're doing with their properties versus the city council wanting to say, do we want to take another look at the development density in those areas? Those have pluses and minuses for all of those property owners. But in terms of if I'm looking at the map and I'm looking in comparison to what has happened in my limited experience here, I can see a lot of the changes in those areas that have happened over the last 3 years are pretty accurately mapped by that conclusion that we drew, sure, that was drawn in the comprehensive plan.
For me, and I think that the concerns I typically hear, they don't revolve around the red areas. It is the residential, where if I'm over there in District 1, I say, man, that's to my colleague, Councilmember Sayre, there's a good portion of the residential area that we are targeting, if we were to use the word encouragement, that we're encouraging for redevelopment. I think that there's a certain amount of citizens that, it may be a good amount of citizens, that they see that and they say, I don't want 20 years from now to this just be an entirely different neighborhood. And I think that, you know, this is one of the main things we balance with development. But, I mean, by design, we're broken up into districts. I look at my district, District 4, we've got a little bit along Broadway, but outside of that, we're kind of locked in, you know. And again, this almost goes back to the ADU question where, and you guys kind of led into what are the components we factor that why is District 1 so heavy and we say let's encourage the development there, whereas District 4, we're pretty close to sitting pretty, and you know, we're not under any likely great overhaul for redevelopment.
Well, one of the factors, actually a couple of factors that John alluded to in terms of the locations of the different intensities, a couple of them were proximity to transit, so the 2 rail stops, and the core area of the city, which is where the majority of the commercial services are provided in Englewood. So those were 2 of the factors that kind of focused the area of potential changes where they are. The other thing that I would mention, I think we've said this to you in the past, is that one of the things that is not changed and is our baseline, is the underlying zoning. But what we've all seen in the last 5 or 6 years, as I alluded to a minute ago, is an unprecedented level of development. And so one of the things that we try to do as staff, and that is trying to do, is look at time and not just the time that we're in. Because the day is inevitable that the spigot is shut off by whatever circumstances happen either in the world, the country, or in Colorado to slow down this real estate cycle, and that the pace of change may not be 3 years from now what we've seen in the past 3 years. And so we always try to figure out where's that middle ground. So if you're interested in taking a look or having an assessment of that residential zoning and whether or not it's right, we would ask you to kind of balance that timeline. And by all means, we're here to work with the Planning and Zoning Commission, if you so direct us, to take a look at those from a zoning standpoint, not the comprehensive plan, but the zoning standpoint of where we are and where we may not be in terms of the balance in the neighborhoods. That would be a pretty considerable project, but that's something that if the City Council has taken a look at and wants to kind of assess the overall viability of those areas and the appropriate scale, we would look at that. But I would again ask you to look at that middle ground and not plan for either extreme. The unprecedented level that we're in terms of the development activity now, or the depths of a recession where you say, we need to upzone all these areas and get more activities going in these areas. I've seen both of those extremes, and that's not the best place to either plan or zone from.
Thank you. And, I do appreciate the ongoing conversation on this, and I think, until I have my last day on council, it will certainly be a subject that I think is on the forefront of most citizens' minds. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Wilson.
Mine is kind of a follow-up on Councilmember Cuesta's on the residential transition areas. And I mean, there's a pretty substantial amount of residential transition areas overall in the city, not so much in District 4, nor as much in District 2, but still, it's a substantial portion of the city. And correct me if I'm wrong, and I believe this is you, Director Powers, did a citizen come to you and ask you what this would look like if all of the yellow areas were developed out? The residential transition areas. What would the city of Inglewood look like if that was totally transformed?
I did talk to that citizen quite a number of times, and they took it upon themselves they asked me how many parcels were located in those residential transition areas, and then I think they took that data and did an analysis, their own analysis of imagining that every single lot would be redeveloped in those areas. Personally, I think that's far-fetched, but I think a lot of these homes will still be there in 50 years, but there'll also be some changes as well.
And I think that this is something really that this
Mayor Pro Tem, could you speak into the mic a bit more?
I think this is something that this council needs to consider, that it is possible that all of it could be redeveloped. I have heard a lot of complaints, especially from District 1, about the development that's going on there and developing the entire lot. The setbacks are really nothing, and it is fundamentally changing those neighborhoods. I understand previous councils have made these decisions, but I also understand that this council could change them too. And I know that I have heard Councilmember Martinez, because we were running at the same time, say, the citizens have said over and over and over again, no more high density. I believe Councilmember Sierra heard the same things, and
a lot of it is happening in his district, but I believe that this is something that we need to look at. And we need to look at it sooner rather than later. We can't keep having these discussions because as long as our comprehensive plan is out there, we have sent a message to the developers that we're in business for you to come in and redevelop our city. Our city is entirely developed. We have no new places to build. Wherever we're going to build has to be redevelopment. And I think it's something that we should consider. And that's one of the reasons that I wanted to look at this right now, because traffic is increasing and it's only going to get more. And the PUD piece of this is very troublesome to me also because we are piecemealing our city together rather than having a land use pattern, which is what zoning maps are for. We're piecemealing it together. And when I bought in my neighborhood, and perhaps my neighborhood is more stable than a lot of neighborhoods, but I bought there because I wanted a single family residential there. I didn't want any other type of development there. But I've heard that come from people in all the districts of the city, not just from the area where I live. So I think that we as a council can make these choices, and I believe the citizens are asking us to slow down the density. Thank you.
I'm not sure who is next over here. Okay, Councilmember Wink.
Thank you. It's my understanding that the impetus of the development of this map is really the responsibility we have to understand development trends in our city based on historic data and based on, and also given the inputs that we have and understand today. And with the appropriate levels of research that have been conducted by our community development team, our city leadership can now understand how the city might be developed in the future. I think by having this kind of guidance, I understand your question, Mr. Cuesta, about it maybe being an unfair sort of suggestive documentation to certain entities. It feels like diligence on the part of the City Development Office, in my view, rather than suggestion. It's diligent work. Where are we? Where have we been? This is the information in terms of what's going on statewide, district-wide, nationwide, worldwide, that may affect our city. So where might we be in the next 20 years? And information like this prevents us from making uninformed guesses and assumptions. Every citizen has a right to an opinion and should and will always have an opinion, and I love it when our citizens are passionate about their city, so they share all their opinions with us. This information that's based on research that this team conducts enables us as the leaders to share with citizens who don't maybe have a direct link to this information that uses data to develop a map like this. We can share this information with them so we're not guessing. We don't want to plan our city based on guesswork and assumptions and, well, my neighbor said this, so this is truth now. Truth comes from facts and understanding and analyzing facts in a sensible way and appropriate way based on what information we're trying to glean from those truths. And so I look at this as a tool that's sensibly orchestrated and sensibly assembled, I beg your pardon, so that we can understand and we're not caught off guard. Things will change. We can't predict the future, but to a complete certainty. But I think it's a very helpful document, and I think it would be helpful for all the citizens to understand where it comes from, what helped in the development of it, and really what it means and what it doesn't mean.
Thank you, Councilmember Wink.
Thanks, Mayor.
Councilmember Berentine.
Again, I think to call this comp plan advisory is a little flippant. It is a huge process. This council can't just undertake to go ahead and make some change to this that easily. I mean, there is a process. It's put into our charter. There's a process that we would use to make any change. So I think to just say it's advisory might be a little bit of an understatement and not really acknowledging the work and effort that went into it. while current trends are always going to go ahead and play some part in it, current trends are exactly that, they're trends. They're not a more thoughtful process for what we're going to see in 10 and 20 years. And as our community development director said, that's got to be taken into account. You can't ignore current trends when you're trying to put together a comp plan, because we're human beings, and that's when we get community input and everything. That does play a part, but it's important for us to make sure that we're looking out at a longer range. I agree with Councilmember Wink. The information that was put on the site did have some confusion for people, and to put them together to eliminate that confusion is unfortunately putting this neighborhood maps on the same level as the comprehensive plan, and I don't believe that that ends confusion. I just believe it mushes it all of the confusion into one document instead. The neighborhood maps do not hold the same weight, nor should they, that the comprehensive plan does. And I think that's where we're getting into some problems with some developers coming forward to us and being a little confused at what we're trying to do, what we do see, or what we would be willing to allow in there. District 3 is getting eaten up there. The heart of this city, the single-family residence, the R1C is getting decimated in this part of it. So is the industrial area. Those were conversations that we had during the comprehensive plan, which I was part of, that we said we were going to protect. And with all of these documents kind of being loaded on and being given all the same weight, I can understand it's going to create more confusion. And then as councils change, they go, well, that was their vision. The neighborhood maps are not part of the vision. They are information that was provided, but they're not the comprehensive plan. And to put all of this together in there as if it's all one document now, I think is misleading and is just going to create some additional angst for people as they see this. And again, I want some clarification that the comprehensive plan is not just it's just not a whim. It's not a thought process that we can just easily eliminate. It's to say it's advisory, I do believe is a bit flip, and to change anything on there is actually a process that's actually put into our charter. It's a fairly extensive process to undergo, and a little bit more than what I think somebody advisory would anticipate. That's all I have. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember Barrington, can I ask you a question?
You certainly may.
Would you be in favor of taking the map off of the site and not utilizing? Is that what you're suggesting?
I am in favor of not combining the map together with it. I think what Councilmember Wink brought up was legitimate, and in a couple of the community meetings I've attended, because the developers reference the other materials that they're seeing, and they're saying, but this is part of your transition area, this is part of your comp plan, your zoning says, but I see that you're thinking about maybe, and they are somewhat in conflict. And
thank you. I understand what you're saying then.
And it isn't currently in there. I thought that this meeting was to go ahead and get some, or at least advise us on whether they were going to put these together. I do not believe that it should be put together with the comp plan like that. I think it misleads.
Okay. Councilmember Sierra.
I have more of a comment. So I echo what Member Cuesta said, and also Mayor Pro Tem in terms of the residential areas. And it goes back to my original question about what the ultimate goal of this map is. And so I think there's something to be said about Inglewood having that small town feel. And you heard it a lot when we met with the boards and commissions. Everybody said, you know, I can't say everybody, but a majority did say they like that small town feel. They like the affordability. So there is something to be said about keeping, having Inglewood be known as a place where you can find a single family home, an affordable home, and keeping basically just that identity. So I would love to continue having these type of conversations about zoning and this map, because I think that there is a lot of transition within the residentials that I don't agree with, but I do see the need to do some redevelopment within the industrials. But I think this is just an ongoing conversation that we should have.
Councilmember Wink?
Thank you. I have a question. Was there not a sort of a limit or a pause, if you will, on development in District 1 until that began in 1991 or ended around there? Do you know what I'm referring to? There was some.
I started in the city in 2001, so I'm not familiar with that.
You don't know of any history.
No.
I feel as if nor do you, Mayor. Okay. If no one does, I'll stop talking and I'll look it up and come back next time.
Okay.
Councilmember Questa.
You bet, and I'll make this brief. So to me, there's two ways that this transition could occur in these residential areas. One, use by right. And, I think that there's a lot of folks that even what you're allowed to do by right, it does not strike the right chord with them. Sometimes you're losing these older homes as those homes have been there a long time. And even though that is something, and it is certainly that property owner's prerogative and right to do it, I still think even that some folks are getting uncomfortable with it, with the rate at which it's happening in some of the neighborhoods. I've seen nothing but a wholesale rejection of PUDs in terms of residents in my time on council. I don't think there's a stomach for it. I've only had one in my district since I began. I think there were more attendees at that than any other meeting that I've had. There were a couple hundred people there, and the developer didn't even go forward with it. So I wonder if this really is the will of the people here, that we're looking for these, what I would call almost a drastic overhaul of District 1. Now, again, if that's used by right, what do you do unless we want to change those zoning laws, which would be very, very touchy, but in terms of PUDs, I just haven't seen the stomach for it from any citizens in terms of residences, with the exception of, I would say, a very, very small group. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. You were part of a PUD over by Swedish, but of course that was quite different. It wasn't residential. It was medical buildings and retail going up. Sure. And I imagine we're going to see more of that. What I find really interesting with this is actually to overlay what the zones allow in those areas that are yellow. The yellow is alarming. I think all of us, I won't speak for all of you, but it was alarming to me when I saw it on one, and thinking that this is where it could go, and this might be what the market would drive to go. This map is actually brilliant to look at because it helps sensitize us to what could happen, and is this what we want? When council started the redevelopment back several councils ago for the comp plan, and by the way, that took a long time for us to agree to even begin a comp plan revision, because people were at odds about whether we should do one or not again, and whether it was too early or too late, and several of us wanted it to happen a little quicker so that we could be on top of the development rather than letting it just happen to us. Some of the land zoning, things like, Mayor Pro Tem and I live in an area, and several of you in R1A, nothing's going to happen like that. But the R1Cs and others where you could do duplexes, you can do a number of other things, land use by right, looking to see where could the market take it, if this is what it could look like, are we comfortable with that? That's where I find this really helpful. But the intent is, go back to when we did do the comp plan, was always, I think everyone agreed with this, we wanted it to be a living document. We did not want it to be like the comp plan before, where it seemed like it was set in stone, and we did not review it and consider what's going on in the present day. So that is what was meant behind it. Now every council can change how they want to do it, but certainly at this point, this could be, I would say, a discussion starter to have a meeting with Mr. Vogelrell, like what he was hoping for with the new information you all have gotten. I remember we are having that conversation about how many homes and homeowners versus renting, and you had old data for that, and you've gotten new stuff. I would welcome a meeting as soon as we can, or we can find it in our study session, to say, okay, let's get the data now and see where we are. Let's map this against where zoning is, because I do believe that this is alarming to some people, and think that this is I've had several people say this is a decision we made, that all this is now going to go to multifamily, and that's what yellow means. That is not what yellow means, but it does mean higher density, a little higher density, or could be. So I think we have to be careful about not conflating the two. If people are interpreting this as what we've decided, that's not quite right, but many of these pieces would take a PUD, and probably this council, and maybe another in the future, wouldn't stomach it for some areas versus some others, like on transit. So I think we should have a meeting in February if we can get one, if you have enough info, and maybe it'll be March, I don't know, but sooner than later, and the intent always was for the council to keep reviewing it, at least from the original council that began this process. So, Mayor Pro Tem.
And I would just, with all due respect, I agree with Councilmember Wink in a lot of areas. We do need the historical piece, but we hired a consultant that came in here and told us what they wanted us to do. But I think we need to be very careful. It is our responsibility, because we live here as residents, as representative of the residents in this city. And the three of you, do any of you live in the city of Englewood? Okay. But it's more upon us. You're there as directors because we live here and we need to represent those other citizens that are here. But we hired a professional person that doesn't live in the city of Englewood either. So those are just things that we need to keep in mind. And I do agree with Councilmember Sierra that the number one thing we hear is the small town feel. And if we keep increasing the population in this city, we're not very far away from that small town feel going away. I've actually even heard some people already say to me that they're thinking about moving because we are losing it.
Yeah, I've heard that too. I've heard people really want a suburban feel and they'd rather move further south, which makes sense. Director Power.
Well, maybe in terms of concluding comments by us, let me be clear. We're here to take direction from you. We understand that. Don't get us wrong about that. So what I've heard is a couple things. One of the things that we will do is we'll go back, particularly for the highlighted residential areas. We'll try to put some numbers on if we did kind of a low, medium, high build-out scenario in those areas. What could it look like in terms of the change of units and the change of population based on an occupancy figure? That's great. We'll give you that information. The critical next step is not so much in the comprehensive plan. If you are concerned about the pace of change and the pace of growth in the neighborhoods, you would need to shift the discussion about whether the zoning is appropriate in some of these areas. And that would be the follow-on to that next discussion, because changing the comprehensive plan would not change the underlying development rights which are housed in our zoning ordinance. And so that would be the critical next step after that next briefing we would do for you, is to get your direction on your appetite on behalf of the community to look at some of these residential areas and then go to Planning and Zoning Commission and develop a process for actually looking at the zoning ordinance and appropriate changes as you so direct.
Can I get a point of clarification?
Of course.
The yellow areas, the transition areas, are not currently zoned for that, but they are considered transition areas, but they are not currently zoned for the higher density.
The vast majority of those yellow areas are zoned as R2, the majority, and so they already can do townhomes in those yellow areas, most of it. Not all of it, but most of it.
Okay, I need to get an answer to the yellow areas for the map for the transition areas are showing this other intent of transition areas. Transition areas, by definition, are not currently zoned for what they would be transitioned to. Is that correct?
As I said, the majority of those areas are zoned as R2 and would allow for 2-unit developments.
Thank you. I'm gonna stop us there.
I need to ask a more clear question.
I think your
Because
question was
to your
clear, but you have a different definition of transition.
Well,
I think that's going on
let me
here.
ask it more, to your point, when people see the yellow areas, let's just take District 3 over that, it's R1C, it's yellow. People cannot put high density in there right now. So it hasn't been rezoned for those yellow areas yet. That's just the transition area. Let's just stick with that little area. Maybe I'll get a better answer for how that is.
Has not been rezoned.
Okay, thanks.
However, there are some areas within the yellow that could go to duplexes, which to some people feels like high density. That's
Right.
not defined as high density, but it is an uptick of people, right?
I think just for
Okay,
what you were
thank
saying,
you.
when they see the yellow, they think it's already been
Yes.
rezoned.
Yes.
Right, okay, and
That's
it hasn't.
It has not been.
Has
So
not.
that's really important to get clear out there, because like you, I'm hearing people on both sides. I have people who bought properties who thought that they could do more with it in terms of development, and then found out maybe it's more restricted even. But That's not usually the norm. All right, let's plan that we, oh, good.
If I could add something, the Community Development Department is doing the Citizens Planning Forum, School, there you go, which is a wonderful opportunity for interested citizens to understand zoning, to learn more about this. And I encourage all of you, or to mention that to citizens, that the communication about all of these details is available in community development, and they're working really hard to make sure that people have an opportunity to have their questions answered.
Great, thank you. As a, one last one.
Where can the information on that be found?
Where's the information for the school?
Yes.
The information's on the community development website page.
I believe we got an email too, but could we send one out to everyone again so everyone has the link, just in case you have trouble finding it?
Give the date and time on it again.
The dates are the last Thursday in April, I believe that's the 25th or 26th, through the Thursday before Memorial Day, so May 23rd, in that.
4 weeks?
It's 5
It's
weeks.
5 consecutive Thursday evenings.
Great, thank you. And if we could summarize this by saying their plan is you'll come back with some of these sort of overlays. And I would love for us to do an update on where we are now that you have current information, so we could become more clear on, you know, what we're looking at and where we're headed. Thank you. We'll take anything else? Thank you for being here and providing this. I guess we're not taking a break yet. Now is impact fee discussion. Right? Interim City Manager Dorothy Hargrove, Director Brad Power, Director Maria DeAndre, and Director Maria Sabata is back up. Will be here to present. So all of you are coming forward, I assume? Talk about impact fee. You'll stay where you are? Okay.
And I will too.
That's good.
And I actually have the remote, so I'll do some of the talking, and then everybody else can chime in. I actually think this is a very interesting transition between the last topic to this one, because one of the things that has been happening, obviously, in Colorado over the last 7 years since the recovery is, as I mentioned earlier, an unprecedented level of development. And one of the things that a lot of communities have done is trying to figure out how they can get more of a balanced approach to the impacts associated with new development. And one of the things that a lot of communities in Colorado have been doing is developing impact fees. And we wanted to provide just a brief introduction to the topic tonight so that we can get some additional discussion going in the future. But impact fees in a nutshell are charges that are made against a specific new development, specifically for the new costs of facilities and programs to service that development. So if you have a major subdivision that rebuilds and there's streets and sewers and parks and all that are associated with something like that, then the developer is essentially charged a fee to help offset the impact from that new development on existing services. So the city is kind of spreading the wealth, so to speak, in terms of pre-existing residents and business owners not paying for the entirety of the cost for new development. The second bullet is very important. We can't charge, or nobody in Colorado can charge an impact fee to pay for existing facilities, operations, maintenance. It has to be directly related to the impacts associated with a specific new development. Impact fees can be imposed on all kinds, all the ranges of development, commercial, residential, industrial. But as I said, they must be tied to the impacts associated with the development. Typically, they fund things in terms of major infrastructure, roads, transportation, parks, but also services, libraries, municipal facilities. Not so much in Englewood, but a lot of the special districts and suburban areas, they're doing those for emergency services, particularly in areas that have not been developed before. A couple of cities include affordable housing in terms of some of the impact fees associated with new development. So the way I would characterize it is it's not 100%, it's part of the menu of things that are done on behalf of municipalities to pay for the new growth associated with development. In terms of some of the challenges and opportunities associated with impact fees, generally as the infrastructure is improved throughout the community, one of the major benefits is values generally increase. If the infrastructure is in good shape, people generally tend to have higher property values over time. And so that's a benefit from diversifying the collection from a wider base than just from the existing tax base as new development comes online. Obviously, if you have more growth, obviously what Colorado is going through now, there's a higher level of impact fees that come in. Conversely, if the development pipeline is curtailed through a recession or otherwise, obviously there are fewer fees that will be collected. It can help offset the impact, particularly of large projects. I think a lot of communities in Colorado are doing this for what's known as greenfield or new development that's done at pretty significant scale, because they can tie the increased capacity of a sewage treatment plant to the development of a 500-home subdivision, and they can make a direct link between the provision of the new development and the cost to service the development. Generally, the costs of these fees are passed on to the end users, be they buyers, renters, lessees. Developers never tend to absorb what they consider to be the cost. They tend to look for ways to pass those costs on to end users. And that can have impact for certain types of projects, particularly if a community is interested in maintaining affordability or actually promoting affordable housing, space for nonprofits. If there's not an exemption that's part of the impact fee, some of those can prove either harder to develop or may actually prove infeasible if the fees are considerable. One of the things that in my limited research of impact fees so far is this is a very legally sensitive issue, because the state statute is very clear about that direct relationship between the impact of the new development and the fee that you're charging. So one of the things that would have to happen is a lot of cities would get a third party to really analyze things in terms of our capital improvement plan. I will mention the comprehensive plan and kind of the scope of future development. As I said, our 5-year capital improvement plan, those types of things, and start to develop based on the scale and pace of development in Englewood versus an Aurora that has tons of vacant land to go into. What is the rational type of fee and linkage between the fee that we would collect and the amount of revenue that we would expect from the fee? So an example of a fee that would be applicable is if a development pays into a fund to construct a park adjacent to a development that would be utilized by the residents of the new development. One that would probably be a little bit more tenuous, as I alluded to earlier, is if we charged a fee to a new development that's placed into a fund to try to address some of the existing backlog of either maintenance or shortcomings in existing infrastructure citywide. That is more of a tenuous legal relationship between the fee and charging a new development. I wanted to briefly mention, and we included in the packet, this is more, this is kind of more art than science, the distinction between an impact fee and an exaction. An exaction is really kind of pulling something out of a development that is intended to become part of something that would impact citywide provision of services. And one of the things that Englewood has done in the past is established a parks, trails, open space land dedication requirement. And one of the things that is objectively identified in that part of the ordinance is to have developers, as they come in, provide land for parks as development comes online. We actually included a real-world example from the recent past in the packet of a project that if they had provided that land fee or that land dedication of actual physical land somewhere on their site, it actually would have been bigger than the development site itself. And so I would argue that our land dedication fee, as it specifically relates to parks, was really developed around a more suburban model than is in Englewood. We have very small lots, smaller scale, more intense. Everything is redevelopment. We have no greenfield development to do in this community. And so one of the things that's happened since that fee was put in place in 2012, the City Council added what's known as a cash in lieu option. So if a developer is developing a parcel, they can actually do a formula that we provided in the packet and pay into a fund that goes into long-term parks improvements. And that's what we've been seeing since that fee in lieu has been put in place since 2012. There's actually been no land dedicated by a development because of those standards are pretty significant. They've all chosen to pay the fee in lieu. And you can see that since 2012, just under $400,000 has been the total collection from that area. And I would actually rely on our interim city manager maybe to, if there are questions specifically around the parks fee and how that's been dedicated. So that's a little bit in terms of an introduction and overview of how impact fees have generally been established in Colorado and kind of the linkage between the impact of a new development and the services required to specifically service that new development. And that's the conclusion of what I wanted to say, and we'd be happy to answer any questions or take any direction for further information that you may want to ask us about. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for being here and presenting. Any questions? Councilmember Barentine.
There was the fee in lieu of when I was on council before, so I'm a little confused. If we could get a little bit more background on what they were doing before, because we've been doing that for a long time, and there was a fund, and what we all did with that money. The land dedication piece of it, this isn't including the land that they're using for parks or open space within the particular project. That's not seeming to be included in that.
That's correct. If they're meeting their open space requirements under our zoning ordinance, that would not be included.
Okay. I would like to kind of, make sure that we're addressing that piece of it, because we do require, a certain amount for that. The document just, and I think that the document being labeled Inglewood's current regulations would make people believe that we have impact fees currently, which I don't believe we do. But if you're referring in the current regulation to the fee in lieu of, I just want to make sure that everybody understands that we do not currently charge impact fees. We don't actually have regulations for it. Okay.
That's correct.
All right. Thank you very much.
Councilmember Cuesta.
You bet. And then I guess I will drill down on that a little bit. I'm trying to find the portion of the packet that seemed to state we would have collected $385K since 2012. The total amount of fee in lieu payments for all residential development since 2012 has been $385,000. So I have that. So that's collected over the past 6 years.
Point of information?
Please.
We do recognize there isn't linear change between 2012 and today, so, I mean, I think it's been exponential over the last 2 years.
I'm not sure we can hear you, Councilmember Wink.
Oh, I'm assuming what Member Quest is doing, just multiplying it times the years and just suggesting we realize that there has not been a linear trend necessarily in growth from 2012 to today in our city. In the recent years, there's probably been more exponential movement on a graph.
To be clear, it's an average. So an average of 64,000 a year. And I wonder, I looked at our budget is give or take about 50 million a year over the past 6 years. It's dropping the bucket. I'm not, that's going to cover less than 1%. And so I wonder, with the development we have coming in, does that sort of a fee even remotely cover it? And as you said, maybe it's not intended to, but I wonder if the offset is there. Like, I look at the project going back to 2012 that you guys gave the example of. The city was supposed to collect 135,000 total. We ended up collecting 57,000 because we gave away a bunch of credits. And that to me is such a difference, I think, in the frame of mind of citizens these days. We're talking about, should we allow new development at all? Whereas 6 years ago, we were paying people to come into the city. And I think that there's a different frame of mind now on that. And I would like to keep that in mind as we set these impact fees. And, what is the city looking to get out of these new developments? What's in it for these citizens right now? I don't have an immediate answer for that question, but that's really front and center on my mind. And that's what I think a lot of people ask me. Why is this good for me? Why is the new development with 300 apartments good for me? And I'll leave it at that for now. Thank you, Mayor.
Mayor Pro Tem. Actually. Okay, Councilmember Sierra.
So thank you for bringing this up tonight. So part of the reason why I asked to talk about the impact fees was obviously there's a lot of interest in Inglewood for some new development, and I was a little bit concerned about the latest PUD that came in front of us, where there was talk of having a residential close to city center but not really having the infrastructure in place. And so there was concern on my end in terms of just noticing or just realizing how many pedestrians would have to walk across Hampton. And so, looking at the capital improvement plan, we had those improvements to Hampton, Oxford, Dartmouth. It's about $3.3 million, but we're not projected to start those until after 2024. So in terms of the final question there, I would like to investigate. But then just also, since it does have to be for some specific purpose, obviously council would have to decide what that would be, but realizing that the developments that we've at least talked about does involve the movement of pedestrians across busy roads. And so I think that would be a worthwhile place to start.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem.
Actually, I think that one of the things that hit me when I was reading this, because we're already fully developed and it's all about redevelopment, and we're limited to how much impact fees we can actually charge, then my takeaway from that whole thing is perhaps we need to reconsider growth, because I think it's going to cost us more money. The interesting thing is, I don't know if any of you have read any of these articles. The Denver Post over the last couple of weeks has been talking a lot about densification of Denver and lack of green space. This was January 15th, and the headline is, "We need more open spaces. Denver residents feeling stifled by city's building boom, seek room to roam." And I think the problem is the same in Inglewood. And already we have had a group of young people form Friends of Inglewood Parks, because we don't have enough money to maintain the parks we have. And if we increase density with apartment houses, it is only going to become more problematic. $385,000 that we've collected since 2012 is really a drop in the bucket in even maintaining the parks, let alone upgrading them. And is it 50 million? It's a pretty big number if we upgrade all of our parks to what they need to be at the current level. Is that correct?
That's what the Parks and Rec Master Plan of 2017 suggested, if everything was done at once.
Okay, and so if we increase density, we're not even going to have enough parkland. So buying property, and personally I do not believe in eminent domain. So if we want more land, we need to be buying property. And I don't think that's, I just think this is something that we need to consider, because the density is going to create more problems than we already have.
Councilmember Bertine.
Again, I don't think the fee in lieu of is anywhere close to what an impact fee should be. I think they're two different things. They're apples and oranges. So, I mean, I also would like, when you come back, to find out what happened with the money before there was, and whether that's included in this amount, or what happened to that piece of it. I do appreciate you're going over the requirements for the impact fees, because they can't just go into some, a little like the fee in lieu of had this, at least previously, little slush fund kind of thing, that it just kind of ended up going maybe not necessarily to parks. It wasn't as dedicated. Impact fees by state law there are requirements of how you can spend. However, something like Oxford Station, where we find ourselves later with pedestrian problems crossing because you've got that extended road, where we might have been able to share some of the burden of what's going to cost us in order to keep people safe. What Councilmember Sierra brought up, if the PUD that was proposed and the problems and the safety issues for trying to create a transit-oriented district out of an industrial area, and the problems and burden that would put on us to try to keep people safe and be able to actually make that piece happen, can be. I mean, so if we have an existing road and it doesn't meet that new requirement, it still can be given that money for lights, for additional, the infrastructure for there. And we have been talking about impact fees since I've gotten back on this council. I mean, the previous city manager was all gung-ho on doing it, and I don't know why we never went forward with something while we were having the construction boom that we were. So I am all for making this come forward and taking a little bit better look at what we would get out of this, along with what you've brought up legitimately, if you believe there's a downside to it or that there would be a cost to it, and what our surrounding neighbors do. But I would like to get some more information so that we can mitigate some of these costs, or at least provide infrastructure, which we did not do at Oxford Station, at least provide infrastructure that keeps people safe, because now we're having to deal with it after the fact. So I appreciate you bringing it forward.
I'm going to take one more, Councilmember Martinez, and then we'll wrap up.
Thank you. If we were to implement impact fees, I'm just trying to think of what are some of the things that we could use those funds for. Obviously, transportation's been mentioned, walking and bicycling. Police and fire services were mentioned in there. It looks like it could be, as long as it's not related to a capital facility.
No, it would need to be related to a capital facility.
Oh, it would be. Okay, I misunderstood that when I read it then. I thought it said it could not be related to a facility.
Impact fees are tailor-made for capital investments related to the development and its associated impacts.
But only kind of new things related to that development.
Correct. The increase in demand that is created by that development can be offset through an impact fee on that development. And so one of the challenges is, and I don't want to belabor this discussion because we would come back with you with a more advanced pro and cons analysis, is in my professional opinion, impact fees are biased toward large-scale, previously undeveloped land. We're talking about the vast majority, and we said this in the memo, the vast majority of the development applications that we process year in and year out are minor subdivisions and administrative reviews. And that means one house or a duplex or that type of thing. And so we would need some outside expert assistance to tell us whether or not that type of impact could be charged against every individual project and what kind of legal justification we have to do it. Because frankly, from a fee standpoint, just in general, that's our bread and butter as a community. The big projects come, but the things that are coming in the door every day tend to be smaller scale and residential in nature.
All right, I'm not going to take any more because I think that what we have is a general consensus that we want you to come back with more. So I'm going to ask you to submit any further questions directly through the interim city manager so that they've got all the questions they need.
If I could ask for clarification, I do think it's important to point out that if you want detailed recommendations, we're going to need expertise that we don't have on staff. If you want us to present what that might look like, we'd be happy to follow up on that, but that's an important point, and if you're directed to investigate that, we'll be happy to do so.
I think we have a fairly strong sense that we do want you to move us to the next step. If that's what it needs to be for you, please bring that forward. I am concerned about time right now, and I also think that one of the issues that's going on here is that we're in a different economic time, and I think this should always be revisited. Even in 2012, I remember the conversations, and who thought what on this, and we were very, we had a lot of difference of opinions even when we come up with what we did. So it would not surprise me that we need to come and revisit this. So let's continue on with that.
Unfortunately, I have to rescind my support of it then. If I was thinking that we were going to get some information from some other municipalities on what they're doing, I believe we have numerous projects that would require impact fees, not just some kind of brownfield large build. And if it requires them getting outside expertise to bring us any additional information, then I don't think so. I think that a further discussion would be fairly inexpensive for us to just find out what other communities are doing and find out whether we even have projects that we believe then should happen. But I'm not for spending money to do this at this point.
At this point, we won't be spending money. We'll have you bring back what you think the best approach is. If you want to look at both what it's in-house, what we get for that, and if it's out-of-house because of what you think, then provide both for us in that. Okay, thank you very much. Let's take a little 5 minutes.
Mayor, I appreciate it.
Sure. put some water on this. It's curling up, but I think it can go in the envelope just fine. Print out another one. I'm sure it's fine. It's not bad. There's no water. I won't tell. Okay. If it goes in an envelope, I think it'll be fine.
Hey, how you doing? Good. See you. Very good. Well, all hands. We got a couple more things. And then we're done. Right back. But it was the holiday weekend. So.
Oh my goodness. Was it like that coming home?
Because a couple hours on Saturday. So.
I don't mind the warmth. I don't mind the warmth. Oh my gosh, I had such a tickle in my voice. I keep, you know what, I worry about, oh, yeah, I moved it, I'm sorry.
No, it's number 3, which I have here, but I think this is the other one that's a problem. That needs to be replaced.
When this is here, I have to be careful about putting this next to it because it gets so hot.
The articles you brought up from the Denver Post, Evergreen Post, those are really interesting.
Yeah.
One of the ironies I found is they spoke to the folks who live in Denver forever, and they were tired that all the parks were drying up being paved over. And then they spoke to folks who just moved to Denver who were saying, I thought there were more parks. So it's like everybody wasn't happy. The people who lived here forever and the people who just moved here too.
Do you have a copy of that 2 bring it and it wasn't in the packet.
Even if you only have one copy, I can get, Jade said she would make another one.
That might not have been a hot thing on my list, my friend. I just wrote my notes there.
Kathy, do you know do you have that list? Or do you have it that we're going to talk about next, the meeting efficiencies? It wasn't in the packet. And I mean, I know I
I've
have a
sent it
copy
to
at
you
home. Yeah, I know.
on email, and I have an extra one tonight if you
Oh,
need
good.
it.
So,
What's asking for?
yes.
I bought extras just in case, but you have had it 3 times.
I know.
Okay.
Yeah, I know. I just didn't
Well,
have
it was
it
in the
here.
last
Yeah, I
week's-
know it was in the last
And it
one,
was
you
emailed
handed
as
it
well.
out before and it was.
Yeah. But I came prepared because I know.
For those of us who didn't.
Do you not get email where you can just copy things off? Can't just.
I do, but I actually had it. And I've been gone all week. I
Yeah.
didn't get home till last night,
Yeah.
so.
All right, speaking of meeting efficiencies, let's get back to the agenda, and this is time to kind of finish up our discussion that we've had a couple times around efficiencies. And I'd like to start with some of the things that we talked about last Monday, sort of recoup our conversation going one by one down the list that I gave you originally, and I know there were new things that some of you added. So I wanted to start with the top one, continuing to limit council response. I heard a little bit that you'd prefer maybe to change where it is. I think what we want to make sure here is that it's really council requests that are coming through. So if you have any further comments about this one, and to find a productive way of addressing things, I want to say at the outset that council meetings are not meant, there are multiple folds of reasons for council meetings, but probably the less productive way to actually talk to a council member to get something done is the regular meeting. It's better to probably call a council member, go through things, or send an email with the council requesting some things and make sure it's addressed. And I hope that your citizens that are coming forward are doing that with you. But a public meeting, there's not the same back and forth to try and get all the information and look at problem solving with them. But that said, we do have time for that and set it, and I'm in agreement. I think that's what we should be doing. I'm just trying to make sure that our time in responding is productive and is within the sunshine laws, and also doesn't consume so much time that we're starting our regular meeting at 9 o'clock, which has happened many times. So some of our, the regular business has gone from 9 to 11. A 2-hour meeting is not uncommon for councils that have very little to no public comment. But how can we make sure this is productive? And I'm more interested in limiting ourselves with this than anything else. So, Councilmember Wink.
Thank you, Mayor. I know that previously, before my time on council, certainly, council requests, once upon a time, they were submitted to our city managers in the form of hard paper. Yeah. Maybe something to consider is not having more pieces of paper and using paper, but perhaps even just a simple electronic way to notate them. So let's say Mayor Pro Tem is speaking in public comment, and I want to, then we've all been given electronic devices. I can easily type it in and submit it, and it's done. Something like that could be a way to reduce some of the time. We still get the information in, it's documented, public and council understands that a request was submitted on this date for this information by this member, and it's followed up with. So there's no gap in terms of solutioning the request or resolving the request, rather maybe an addition of a little more time during our regular meetings.
That's a great idea. Mayor Pro Tem?
I just have a question. Have we really decided that we shouldn't respond to citizen comments at all? Like have one council member, whether we take turns or when citizens come forward, if there's no response, I think it's what they've been talking about all along. It's like we're not listening to them. They just come up and talk and.
Well, I can agree with that to some extent, except that we have been talking to them nonstop for months. I mean, for most of the time that I've been at council in the last 2 years, we've taken a lot of time responding to them. What I don't think we've done a very good job is making really specific council requests so that it gets documented what's done next, and keeping track of them, even on our council request sheet, to make sure that they're being followed up in a timely manner.
Okay, and I'm okay with talking about council requests, but we're done. We're not going to respond to citizen comments at all, because we've responded to them enough in the past.
I think what we were saying is that some of the responses to them have been out of line. They become agenda items.
Yeah, I'm not saying that that's not a problem.
Yeah, I think that's what the problem we're trying to get at. I mean, you know, you say, gosh, I'm sorry that this has happened. I'd like to make a council request for, you know, whatever, but that's it. There are some things that just said that it's really, I don't know what else we can do other than just, you know. And many comments that people made in the past, no one did respond to either. You just kind of let it go because someone's letting off steam.
Well, and that's true. But I also know that citizens can contact us by email. But I've had citizens ask council directly who responds. Not very many council members respond to that. But I mean, that is. I generally try to. I don't always. I'm not going to say I always do. But I think we need to be more diligent in doing that.
You're bringing up a good point, because there was a point in time where we were all wondering who is responding to the emails, and that's a good conversation for us to have. If it's someone from my district, I always respond, but we all might have different ways that we respond to folks, and that should be a good discussion. But let's not take that.
Okay,
Let's do that another time, because I think it's a really good point, because I am worried about some people constantly emailing. I'm not sure if anybody's emailing back. Councilmember Bjornton, I think is next.
I think part of the concern is that we had a conversation about the public comment, and that we were going to try to put it more into council request format, and it just fell off the agenda and stopped. And that seemed to be a decision that this council didn't make. So I would like to make sure that we still have the council comment to the citizens, and if we want to leave it in the form of council requests or some additional information, but at least there's some acknowledgement that they came and tell the public. Sometimes feels the need whether they're getting responded to or not, or whether they're not getting the response that they want. It is not just commenting to council. That is a period of time where they are able to go ahead and put things on the public record and speak to the public, as we're doing in there as well. As for the council requests, I think we can all do a little bit better on following up on the requests that we make, trying not to put too much onto staff, and there are some, I think I brought up last time, there are some that are not getting attention, and maybe we just need to follow up and find out why. But I think the council requests as well, for the public's sake, to know that we're following up on things, that staff is being directed to follow up on things, that process needs to be done in public, so that they're aware that we're hearing them, and that we're directing staff, or that we're at least concerned enough that we want some additional information. We do not make council requests for every single issue that comes forward to us. And so then I've had people say, why didn't you ask for more information? And I will explain that to them, and I will contact them. But for some things, I think it is important that we make it very public that we're looking into things and the staff is doing it. And sometimes that can de-escalate a situation so that people are patient and wait for some of the response, understanding that we may not have the answer right away. So I would like that part to remain public, and I would certainly like anything with the agenda not just to fall off of there like it did with the council comment.
So you'd like to move it back up to where it was and have it be a council request public time?
It actually was, I think that's a little bit of a misstatement. I don't want it where it was, because we did it for such a short period of time, I think 2 whole meetings, where it was actually just, we were trying it out, and then all of a sudden with no conversation, it just got taken off of the agenda. So I don't know that we really had enough time
it being the transitioning into trying to just do requests and maybe not as much.
I think the answer was yes. Thank you.
The
Councilmember,
other thing would just be that the policy, once we have the policy out, if there is anybody that comes, certainly and specifically attacks any particular council member, it is in our policy manual that we have a plain personal preference so that you can at least answer that. So aside from that, yes, I would like it to go to just being limited to council requests for response.
all right, Councilmember Questa.
Thank you. I think a lot of it's incumbent on the council member request, on the council member to close the loop. I put in a couple of requests past couple of weeks, and staff's been kind of getting information back, or I'm going to discuss them again in council member's choice. And I think a lot aren't going to get resolved that night. You're going to need information, you're going to have to follow up, and some of these even take weeks, months. So I think that a lot falls on the council member. He put in a request, and that goes for me twice over. It's incumbent on me to follow up and make sure that there's some resolution that's reached, hopefully to the satisfaction of the citizen, although that's probably not always going to be the case. And we come back to personal attacks a lot, and to me, we might want to put a sharper point on that, because I think there's a difference between saying Dave Questa has a big nose, which is true, or Dave Questa made a terrible decision on that vote, which I think is probably fair game, and hereby that was a bad decision for a citizen to say. And that to me is sometimes I think that we define somebody questioning our votes as personal attacks, and I personally do not think that's personal attack. I think that's well within the boundaries of a citizen to bring up with us that they disagree with a vote that was cast. Thank you.
Name calling, for one, would be, yeah, what you're talking about. You know, this becomes the object, it's probably not very respectful. Keep it not personal. Councilmember Martinez, then I'm going to give a
Yeah,
suggestion.
in regards to council response to citizen comments, I understand why people feel a little uncomfortable because it's awkward to be up there and talking and then there's no conversation. It feels unnatural. So I think something else on this list about kind of what to expect at council meetings could help a lot. But in terms of our response to that, I think we should ask for council requests during council member's choice. And I think we are going to respond at that right afterwards. I think we should either limit our time, whether we split that 1 minute among 7 of us, or take turns responding to all. I think it would just be more efficient.
Councilmember Questa, did you need to push yours?
Pardon me.
Okay, that's right. So thank you for that great idea. We tried that at one point, and I think it worked when we did do it, and then we just stopped doing it. I don't know if you were on then or not. Yeah, I don't think you were. Actually, I think it was a while ago, and we did this rotation right after, and we tried to limit it, and it was really good. We had one person we just rotated through. This night it was Amy, Martinez. This night it's Questa. This night it's Wink. And each one we didn't put a time limit because nobody was really going over that long, but I think we should, because some of us can get a little bit longer. Just, these are the 5 council requests I heard tonight. And then the option is for anyone else who heard one that wasn't presented, they can put their light on, but 1 minute only. So maybe we limit the council request to 4 minutes by the main person on that night, and then a follow-up if, someone hears something, and it's done right after the public comment. But anything else could come up in your council member time if you wanted. You can always make comments about stuff in the council member time. Nobody's being limited on that, because then it's not a back and forth thing. So does that seem like that's a possible way to handle this? Councilmember Questa?
I think that's fair, as long as there's the heads up on who's going this way.
Yeah, I think we'll start at your end. You wear Monday night? Let's try it. Let's try it and see how it works, okay? All right. This then goes to the second thing, which Member Martinez mentioned, and I think guidelines would be very helpful. Interim City Manager.
I would just like to request or put out the idea that during the city manager's report, I could read off the council requests that I've heard, because often they're coming very quickly. I want to make sure that they're well crafted and capture the intent of council. So it would be kind of a good recap at the end of every meeting. Did I get all right council requests? So if you wouldn't mind.
Could we do that twice? Well, that is what she's saying. So we all would say ours, and you would recap them at the end to make sure you got them all right, so that we don't begin a discussion at the point that someone's.
I think it's important, like you said, when you say Councilmember Questa, if he's doing it the first time, that there's some expectation that he would give some kind of feedback on what he believes
So what I was suggesting is, so member Questa would Monday night, after he's heard all these comments from public, scheduled and unscheduled, he would be noting where he thought there were some council requests. And when it's his time, he will say that. If one of you thinks he missed one, though, I think now it's time to say something, or we could move that to the end. And what she's just saying is at the end, then she would recoup it. You're asking for us to do it all at the same time, and I would suggest, no.
I think that I think all of us should at least make the council request at that time as well for that portion of the meeting. I think that would be a wise thing to do.
So all of us speaking?
No. I think that if he, with his recap, if he misses something that somebody else believes should be a council request, we should bring it up at that time, because if there is any clarification.
That's what I said. That's exactly what I've been saying, so it's fine. I think we got it. All right, so we're going to, and then she's going to recap at the end.
If you would recap at that time, just to make sure that we've got,
That's what's been said.
because if we're going to wait 2 or 3 hours later and say, no, you misunderstood Dorothy, what he was saying, I think that's somewhat unfair. So if we could just get that portion, we may have other council requests later, but at least for that portion, if we could just vet it out at that time.
Councilmember Martinez.
I just want to say, we're talking about making our meetings more efficient, and I think a recap twice would be not efficient. I think at the end of the night, if we've made other council requests through our council member's choice, at that point, at the very end, you would recap.
I would prefer that as well, partly because I don't want to have this go back and forth thing up there, which is I think what wastes most of our time up there, is we have this constant dialogue going on because someone doesn't understand, and at the end, I think there's way more possibility that it could all be tracked. And
I'm not sure that they're going to understand 2 or 3 hours later better. So I was just trying to make it more efficient, actually, and more understandable so that we could get it done. But
well, let's try it this way. Monday night, we can always evaluate. Nothing is set in stone. Number 2, having a guide, I think could be extremely helpful. Are you all in favor of us soliciting staff to maybe present what was on in a meeting and perhaps some ways in which respect could be demonstrated, which I think then could mean that I don't read, which Mayor Pro Tem suggested not reading that thing twice and maybe making it even shorter than what it actually is. Very, very succinct. Councilmember Wayne.
First of all, do we actually still need to use these, or can I?
I think I'm going to for now. Just, I mean, we're being a little loose, so
Okay.
I would like it to be.
Thanks. So I think that the guide might be able to shorten time because it might explain pieces like the first point we discussed, whether or not the audience understands that we are going to respond or we're not, or when we are going to address to help relieve that uncomfortable silence or pause that might exist. So I think a guide is always helpful, and we've stated what is, what isn't. Expectations can be firm. Yep. I think it'd be a good idea.
Councilmember Martinez.
I agree. I think it can be real simple, and I think it can be especially helpful for folks who have not attended a meeting before and have no idea what to expect. I think it will be helpful.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Actually, I think it's probably a waste of staff time because people that come to the meetings can figure it out fairly quickly. I think once we decide what our policy is going to be and you start doing it, I think it's pretty easy to pick up on that.
I'd like to try it because there's some people who've never come to a meeting and they don't come often. Just a little flyer that sits out in front that they can pick up and look at what the process is a little bit. I actually think it might be helpful here. We have people who are raising their hand, like want to speak, and that's not the way this forum is set up either. It might be helpful for someone who comes in the door the first time here. Maybe it's just a few pieces of paper. People won't pick them up if they've done it so many times. But I'd like to at least try it. We have one, no, we don't need it. Councilmember Sierra.
No, I agree. I've spoken to many people that just don't understand the process, so having that written documentation would help.
Councilmember Martinez.
I was going to say, and also have it on our website.
Yeah, okay, on website. Mayor Pro Tem.
Well, another thing, Bob's Rules of Order are pretty clear about how we operate meetings. And that's why we never had to print documents. Robert's Rules of Order, so, which says public can't speak at these meetings, so.
But people don't understand the first time they come. So I'm just trying to, I think it's helpful for the public. No staff presentation. Well, so this third one is something we just started, and it's not having as much of a presentation. Councilmember Barentine.
example that you brought up why somebody might raise their hand here, and I've seen that happen over the years, is that we talk about people in this meeting sometimes, and sometimes it's offensive and a little gossipy or maybe anecdotal, or maybe we've got it wrong, and somebody is maybe a little offended that it's being put out there in the ether and taped, some comments that aren't accurate. So maybe we could put on there how somebody can go ahead and correct that so that it's done just as publicly in the forum as what we're doing. And so sometimes it's not just that they're not understanding the rules, but that they think that not fair or equitable. So I think some of that needs to be put into place as well.
Sure, that sounds good. No, we will not put anything out there until you've seen it. I want all of us to feel like we're good with whatever we put out there.
Thank you for the clarification.
Are you all okay with staff doing less presenting? We're trying to move a few things in here so that you get a lot more questions answered and so forth, discussion here, but how are you with the way it's gone so far? Councilmember Preston.
What would be the determining factor on whether they present or not? It just says less presentation. So which ones go forward and which ones would not?
I think that's a question we have to ask ourselves. I think for things that are brand new, that are really, I don't know. We've mostly been going with trust that we've all done our homework, and if you have to do 5 minutes, do 5 minutes, but that's kind of what we've come, I don't know, City Manager, do you want to suggest what you've been telling folks in the last month or so?
My understanding is that we would prepare no presentations and just be available for question. I mean, we could provide a quick overview, but that's usually in the council communication. That's entirely up to council.
So it would be, okay, thank you.
Go ahead, do more.
So it's a full elimination of staff presentation.
That's what this is saying, and we've done that mostly in the last couple of regular meetings, but there have been times where we haven't, where people, I mean, obviously the PUD and the public hearing and everything went really, really long. What are you thinking about that?
As long as staff is still available for questions, and there's certain instances where nobody has a question, but there's some where there's 10 questions, and so as long as staff is ready, I'm sure that they'll remain with the information in the packet if they
Yeah, that is the intent of this. They come up and they're there to answer questions. Yeah.
Can I please remind you guys to speak directly into the microphone? We are having some people that are having issues hearing. We are actively working to fix this issue. However, in the meantime, if you guys wouldn't mind speaking directly into it. Thank you.
Sorry about that for the public. I'm not sure who was next. Councilmember Bernstein?
And I apologize, but if the public didn't hear, the staff is working on making sure that we speak into the mic and get it louder, and so that you know that we're working on it. The presentations, I do not want the council meetings to look like we're just voting on stuff. And the meeting is just as much an education piece and for the public record, for the community as it is for us. And so we've just got enough information we can all vote, isn't giving the reasons why we're voting for things. A little bit of background sometimes is necessary. I think during the the leadership meeting each week, as you're doing the agenda, you're going to have to start making some decisions on what may need to be presented. And there are some things I'm sure that don't need to be presented on, but there are some things for the sake of the public that they have a right to know what it is we're voting on and what's being presented to us. I don't like it being couched in that if we just know what we're doing, we're just sitting there pushing lights all the time and people have no clue what's going on. I mean, we're just voting on C1, 3 and going through. And so there are some things that I think it's really important that it's both on the record, that people can go back and look at what was voted on and get a little bit of information. And I don't want them to be reliant just on our questions, so that they have a depth and breadth of understanding of what's going on with it. The material is available to them as well, but I think it's important that they understand how their representatives are voting and what we're voting on. So there has to be some information being provided at the time. So I think the leadership needs to decide maybe where that's appropriate and where it's not. I don't know
I agree that not everything needs to be presented on ad nauseum, but at the same time, I want to have something that's on the record to acknowledge that.
Mayor Pro Tem.
I would agree with that. One thing that I was thinking, the consent agenda items, we've always had that there is really no presentation on those because there's enough information, or we can ask questions without pulling them and still vote with them all together for clarification. I really would like perhaps at least abbreviated staff presentations on the items under number 11. Specifically, I think we need to be careful about not, becoming so efficient that we, like Councilmember Berentine said, just vote on things and finish real quickly. Also, even though in the question piece of it, there's still going to be the packet information and the memo. But staff presentation, I think, helps a little bit clarify sometimes things too. I don't think that's creating, I think some of these things are just moot points. Some of these things have been important, but we've had a couple meetings that have gone really long, and a lot of it isn't because of the efficiencies, it's just there was way too much on the agenda. So I don't want to overreact and cut it down too far.
Councilmember Martinez.
Thank you. I think if it's a second reading, we don't need any presentations, but I would still like to have some short staff presentations, only because I don't expect all of our citizens to read all the documentation like we do. So I think short presentations would still be good. But I think Mayor Pro Tem made a point about consent agenda not needing presentations. I think we should still not have staff presentations for that. But on new items that we haven't talked about before, definitely still have staff presentations would be condensed.
So we have been doing it this way for the last couple of times. It has shortened the meeting a bit. Could you suggest a number of, guidance for the staff, how much time do you think would be appropriate for them? 3 minutes, 5 minutes?
I think 5 minutes would be absolute maximum. Because I think they can present a lot in 2 minutes.
Anyone want to object to that? Councilmember Berentine?
I think we have to separate, we brought up the example of the consent agenda now, and I would agree with that the second reading that we probably wouldn't need to. If we do need to have something more in depth, then maybe we should move it, then maybe we should be more willing to table it if it does rise to so many questions that we want a presentation, and that way they would have, be forewarned of it. But for the most part, I would agree with that. As for the example that you brought up of the public hearing, I would never think that we would want to limit a public hearing either in the presentation from the developer or staff. I don't want to limit that, but we should certainly already severely limit the public, and we would never want to limit the public. That's the purpose of a public hearing, is for a public record. So I don't think we have as much leeway on that. But as for the consent agenda, I would agree for the second reading, and I know you guys have gotten a lot better on that, but to maybe limit it to 3 to 5 minutes, and then maybe the rest of it could be vetted out in questions.
Councilmember Questa.
Thank you, and certainly, to me, public hearing goes without saying, the clock gets turned off, and that takes as long as it takes. In terms of the 5 minutes for staff presentation, that's fine too. Truth be told, I bet the vast majority of staff presentations are already under 5 minutes, so I'm not sure if we're really trimming the sails at all with that, but that's okay. And I certainly, if anything that's in the spirit of, folks that are just watching, that most people don't have the time to read that whole packet, that's fair. Thank you.
Yeah, I did want to comment on how many things are on. Councilmember Sierra.
I was just going to say, just real quickly, I would prefer just thinking about some of the meetings that we've had previously. I didn't really see a need to have the presentation for a lot of the items. I did think that the one aspect that we did need in was just the first and second reading of a PUD, and just restating what was discussed last time around. Other than that, I don't think that it's really necessary for a lot of the items on there.
we'll try it out a few weeks with Mayor Pro Tem and I, figuring out some of them that might need a little bit more because it seems so new to us. But we'll try and keep it limited. And definitely PUDs always will have more, and it goes, like you said, goes without saying that absolutely a public hearing is a public hearing, which is why there's something down here about making it a special meeting, but we'll get to that next. So we'll try some things with that, opening it up a bit, and maybe it's the choice of the director to come with questions, though, but that will help unload some of this. More consistent use of consent agenda. I think this was one that we know we do like some of the ways we've been doing it in terms of if it's had a 7-0 vote already on the second reading, it goes under consent right away. Are there any other sort of criteria that you would find helpful for consent to say, you know what, pretty much go ahead? Mayor Pro Tem and I have a hard time guessing, you know, can we do this or not? And it does confuse people, and it looks like, I think it's more helpful to know if you want it off consent agenda, then let's just do it. Just makes it more seamless. So do you have any criteria? Or should we just keep guessing the way we have? Member Sierra.
It's just hard for me to chime in on that just because I'm not sure the level of information that you get for a consent agenda. So for me, it is a guesswork to even just state whether or not we need to continue going with the current process or not. So I just don't have enough information to say one way or another.
I do have to say, I have never been on council, except for the last year, that we've had so much on the agenda because of everything that needs to come through. And almost always, it's stuff that has to come that night, or we're stuck on something, and the city's, you know, stuck in a bad place. So with that in mind, and part of it's the budget, or not budget, but it's our policy and procurement and how what has to be brought forward. We're abiding by a strict interpretation there, and that's what we want. So that's why we have so many things on the agenda. Councilmember Martinez was next.
I have to say, I think Mayor and Mayor Pro Tem, you guys have been doing a great job of deciding what's to goes on the consent agenda. I think there have been less items pulled as of late, it feels like to me. But if we are going to decide, I wonder if we could set a threshold at a dollar amount, maybe, or a topic, or I'm not sure how else to cut it back, or to scale that depending on what goes on consent agenda.
Let's hold that as an idea.
What you mean by dollar amount? I'm not quite sure what you're suggesting.
Like if we approve something for a certain dollar amount, maybe if it only goes on consent agenda, if it's under a certain dollar amount.
Let's hold that in our brains. Councilmember Cresta?
You bet. I'm happy with Mayor Pro Tem making a decision. I do think in many matters that you guys present varying perspectives on things. So I think between the two of you, you know, you both defend ideas, and I think that you're a good yin-yang to make that decision. So I'm happy with that. You mentioned that it was until a year ago that these meetings started running that long, give or take. Is that the sole thing that you have, I guess, pinpointed that is the difference, is that we're now abiding by that strict threshold, or that strict definition on purchasing, which is good. I entirely support that as well.
That's one of them.
Here to share those.
Some council members just talking, repeating over and over.
I guess I'm a common denominator having
You
showed
are?
up within the past year. Just kidding. Thank you.
It's gotten really worse since May. No. Mayor Pro Tem.
I just was going to say, I think another thing that has dictated the length of the meeting, especially that night, there have been a lot of items from the police building. And once the police building is finished, then that should calm this down, and then everything may just fall in place. And as far as I think the dollar amount on the consent agenda items is going to be difficult because we don't have that information yet when we're planning the meetings. And I don't know if it's possible to get that earlier. So this guesswork may still continue for a while.
Yeah. Okay, so on this one, we'll continue to sort of hammer it out with the two of us and trying to figure this out. We have been very diligent when we were buying anything on the prime to make sure it came out of consent and went into the regular. I don't know if you've noticed that or not, but we did. All right, so we'll keep working on that. Be consistent with following Bob's rules. This is something I could use your help on as well. And I just want to, one thing go over this again with our city attorney, and because she's the queen of Bob's rules, is sometimes we use point of information, point of this, point of that, to just sort of interrupt. And that really is not what it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be a really, if you really need something right now to make a decision in the midst of something, go ahead and use it. But wait your turn otherwise, if not, because it does interrupt the flow of talk with someone and their thinking, and then we get off track. And I want to give you all the opportunity to talk. I'm trying to be nice about it, but I want to keep us on track. So let's be careful about how we use all those points of everything. And we're going to get better at it as we use them more often. Councilmember Barrington.
I would just like to include, just interrupting each other as well, including to the mayor, and making sure that we're all adhering to the same time limit as well. And not to be interrupted. You make a good point. It truly, it hurts the flow of it and creates animosity that doesn't need to be created and interrupts the meeting. So I appreciate you bringing that up.
We've already talked a bit about executive sessions, and I think we're just going to have to deal with those as they come, but we are going to have some things come up regarding attorney-client privileges, and then also some things around buildings. And I guess just my only, unless you have something new to add to this, is let's be really open in thinking this through, and if you have a threshold of what you need to make a decision to go to executive session, let it be known what sort of information. But otherwise, I think we have to take it case by case. We are not a city that doesn't use executive sessions. We do. We've used them very sparingly my entire time on council. Mayor Pro Tem.
One thing just that has become apparent in the last year perhaps is maybe just making sure that we have enough, give the public enough information that they have an idea, a pretty accurate idea of why we're going in.
And considering separate meetings, special meetings for public hearings, what do you think about that? That's something staff suggested that maybe would be entertainable, and I had never thought of that before. Councilmember Martinez.
I really like that idea, particularly if we anticipate long presentation and a lot of folks. I think it could warrant its own dedicated meeting.
Councilmember Questa?
I don't think that's a bad idea at all. Having said that, I think that adding additional meetings doesn't necessarily shorten meetings for these stuff. Having more.
It maybe makes us more effective for the rest of the stuff we have to decide, because it's unfortunate what ended up at the latter part of that meeting. We were all I was sort of brain dead by then and just not really able to function as well. Councilmember Sierra.
So my preference would be to have it on the same night as a council meeting, and the reason for it is just my travel schedule. So it's unpredictable, not sure exactly when I would have to travel. So if I had to block out another day, like my trip next week, I'm leaving Tuesday morning. So the expectation for me is that I will have time on Tuesday morning in order to fly out to wherever I need to be. So that would be the preference on my side.
Well taken. I would hope that we would know well in advance and be able to pick together too. So I would not want to be springing it on anybody, because we have several here who travel. I think at least 3 within this. So Mayor Pro Tem's next.
I actually would like to leave it on the regular meeting, if at all possible. I think the problem that one night was there were a lot of other things on the agenda. So if we know there's a public hearing coming up, we probably need to try to make sure that we have the agenda fairly clear that night.
Yeah, that night as well, I think the public comment at 2 hours, maybe even longer. Councilmember Barrington.
It wasn't the public hearing, but it's not the public hearing that's the problem. I think there was too much on there, and I think as we try to get a little bit better on answering the constituents' concerns and problems so that they don't feel the need to continue to come back time after time, that we might be able to reduce some of that period of time, because I think what we're hearing is that they don't feel that they're being heard. I think putting it on any other time frame is inappropriate for the public and transparency. Public meetings should be held at a regularly scheduled meeting time. I think that the convenience not only for council members, but it's the convenience for the constituency, and some consistency on how they can expect that, so that they don't think that something in the future is going to be put on a Thursday night or Wednesday. At least they know, and I think that's just the normal course of our business. So I would prefer that not be changed out of that
set special hearings, special meetings at the direction of the council. And any action that can happen at a regular meeting can happen at a special meeting.
Thank you. It sounds like we have a bit of a mixed thing in that, so why don't we do this with this? When the next one comes up, if it does, we'll take a look at the schedule, and if it looks like it was as long as the one in December, we'll come to you and ask, would you be willing to entertain this on another night? And the answer might be no, but at least we've considered it as a possibility, right? So I don't think we're as clear on that one. The next one is proclamations. I tend to agree with Mayor Pro Tem on this. If people have asked us to do a proclamation, we probably need to do it. I'd like to not read that last little part that says all the signing and stuff like that. It just seems silly. Try and make it shorter, but I'd also like a process. We've done this on and off too. When one of us gets a request or the city manager gets a request, which it can come through many different ways for a proclamation, that we send it out, we send out the idea to you all, and if we don't hear that you don't want it, we're going to go for it. Okay, so that's sort of how I've done it with Mayor Pro Tem. I've sent it to her. Do you have any problems with this? But I think it might be better if all of us are deciding whether we want something or not. But if you don't have any problem with it, don't worry about it. Is everybody okay with that? No objections? Okay, a little bit more input.
If we could, make sure that we know what the process is so that anybody, we know how it gets on there to your attention, so that if anybody else on council would like to have a proclamation done, as you did in the last meeting, and I know it was, we all agreed to it, but if we have something come forward, how we would do it, what the process would be.
Just send it to us. I can tell you right now, just send it to the city manager and have them send it out to all of us. I mean, we've had it come through different city council members my entire time, where someone gets asked, hey, could you make a ruling about ovarian cancer? And it just comes on up and we can decide. So just send it on to the city manager, and she can send it out to all of us and we'll decide. Okay? Same thing, any one of us. The last one, other council ideas. I heard several. I heard a process for proclamations, which I just mentioned how we could do that. The limit and overload of meetings and decisions. We are trying very hard to figure out how to move some things off. I am hoping that the police building won't be one major chink in it all, but we will see. I don't know. I think procurement policy will help if we make some shifts there, perhaps, with that fit the 21st century and the amount of money that things cost. But we can try hard to keep moving those things around. Did I miss anything else that someone else suggested last week? Councilmember Runtime.
Everybody has things going on in their life, I understand that, but I would prefer that if we're going to have something that's contentious, that's an important vote, that we are considerate to each other and not try to schedule those for nights where we're not going to have a full council, or that we have citizens coming forward at the request of members that we postpone something until they get back. So I'd prefer not to have those on those nights. If we're doing things because that has to be done immediately then, or it's not, well, then we've got some other more serious problems that we need to address in our scheduling. But both the attendance and in conjunction with issues of import, so that we're not putting anybody out not being able to vote on something, and that was more than happy to make sure that that got delayed, but that just ended up taking more time on another meeting. And a little bit more from our leadership on realistic. Our job is to make sure that we vet these issues, that we have discussion, that the public knows what we're doing, that we're transparent, and that sometimes takes some time. So maybe a little bit more realistic expectation about some issues and the time that they're going to take, and not overloading the council meetings, because some of them have been really overloaded, and then 2 weeks later we've got this thing that's really, so whether it's scheduling for staff and maybe working through that schedule a little bit better, or the leadership for council addressing some of those issues a little bit better, because I agree with the mayor, we're not productive at 1 o'clock in the morning.
Yep, we are. Thank you. All right. Anything else? Any other ideas that were solutions? I think we have a good running start here of some things to try then. And we will revisit this as we see fit. If you think this isn't working, please let me know, or let Mayor Pro Tem know, and we'll try and come back to it. All right. Next up is our agenda item 6, which is Code Enforcement Advisory Committee.
next steps discussion. I think we left our regular meeting with some things up in the air and some concerns. And so I don't want, this is a committee that is serving at, giving their time to us as a city, and I want to make sure that their time and the people who are engaged in this kind of work are being respected in all aspects, including the citizens who they're serving. So with that in mind, I think Councilmember Sierra was the one who brought this up. Would you like to address anything tonight to start out?
So, last Monday night, I did ask that we look again at the Code Enforcement Advisory Committee, and specifically looking to pausing this committee for for a certain time frame. And the reason for this was, there was an email that was sent between the committee. It was forwarded to the entire committee members, including the two liaisons, myself and Mayor Pro Tem. And you all should have read that email as well, because I sent it over to the city manager, and just caused some concern on my end. The basis of the email was basically there was a Nextdoor post that was a screenshot was taken by a member of this committee. It was forwarded on to the chair, and the chair then replied back and provided just some direction to the committee. So I felt that just the basis of the email, the concerning part of this was not only just the content, but just the fact that it went against charter. And so what I wanted to show here was just that the email basically was just a process of the steps that needed to be followed, not only by the citizen, but also by this committee member. And so there were two items specifically that caught my attention, and so I'll read the entire email, just being transparent in that I'm covering in full. So basically, it was again, it was an email that started with a screenshot from a post within Nextdoor by a citizen, went to a committee member, went to the chair, and the chair responded by, "Did you tell them to call code enforcement and ask code enforcement what they can do? Did you send them the code for ice and snow and inform them of just how long it takes to get a ticket from code? Did you ask them for their address?" And then here's the first part that concerned me. "Did you call code and record the conversation when you told them about the situation? Did you meet with code enforcement and help work out a solution? Did you notify the council person for that district? Did you go and take pictures?" And then the second part that concerned me, "Did you video your on-site conversation with code enforcement?" So there's two instances there where I feel that there are that they're looking to impede the investigation of code enforcement, or at least impede their job. And so I feel it's just going against charter. And if you look at section 32 of the charter, it reads, "Council shall deal with the administrative service solely and directly through the city manager, and neither the council, its members, nor committee shall either dictate the appointment or direct or interfere with the work of any officer or employee under the city manager, either publicly or privately." So it was those two items. I feel that they're directly going against charter at this point. Again, this was just a communication between two members of the committee. It didn't involve anyone else. There was actually, after that, there was the chain continued. But really, it was just adding agenda items to that next meeting. But it wasn't specific to impeding the investigation of the code enforcement officers. And so actually, I want to ask a question of the city manager, if she is aware of any times that this process has gone into effect, in the sense that have any committee members taped or video recorded code enforcement when they're on duty?
I have checked with our police commanders and the code enforcement officers, who do report that on numerous occasions the code enforcement officers have been videotaped and their conversations recorded while they're in the midst of an investigation.
Point of information.
Can I add? The portion of the charter that you just read is not referring to the Code Enforcement Advisory Committee. It is referring to the City Council. Is that correct?
No.
what it says is the council, its members, and committee. And as I'm interpreting this, the committees are the direct appointees of the council, and therefore they act at the direction of council. So, as I'm reading this, it's the city council, its members individually, the committees that it appoints shall not interfere with the work of officers or employees, either publicly or privately. So I think it's trying to make sure there are no back doors around its directive.
Okay, then another point of information. Is some of the bylaws of the Code Enforcement Advisory Committee in conflict with the charter?
Possibly. And I need to be clear that the Code Enforcement Advisory Committee bylaws are pretty much the standard bylaws that the 2 or 3 committees that have bylaws, they're trying to get it standardized. But I think that they are on occasion interpreted to give committee members, and not just code enforcement, but any committee, authority to direct, like the staff liaison, which they don't. The staff liaison is there directly at the request and direction of the city manager. So there may be some cleanup work that needs to be done on bylaws. And honestly, until some of these issues started to raise their head, I hadn't been paying very close attention to those little details in those bylaws.
Thank you. Councilmember Sierra, anything?
Well, I was just gonna, just to wrap up, so, I'm asking for a pause, and what I'm asking for this pause, and actually it goes to Mayor Pro Temp's point, is that, we do need to set clear boundaries on the scope of the processes and procedures for the Code Enforcement Advisory Committee. And this is gonna include also, reading the bylaws and also reading the charter. There's just some portions here that I'm not comfortable with. And specifically, obviously, the city manager is responsible for the administrative task of the city. We're responsible for policy. And so, within, one of the things I want to look at is just understanding the ordinances under Title 15. What is it that Code Enforcement Advisory Committee should be working on? Because that to me sounds like it's really coming from a direction from the city manager, but also council needs to be involved as well as code enforcement. And just understand what ordinances under Title 15 are vague enough to where it is causing an issue with the way that they're doing their job. So if we can look at that and just agree what would provide more benefit to the community if we were to look at specific ordinances for 2019, that would be one step. And then obviously just the clear process for how these ordinances get back to the city manager, to council, and to the city attorney. Those were the 3 things that I would like to highlight in terms of this pause for the committee.
Thank you. Councilmember Barentine.
I have 2 questions. The first one is for the city attorney. Could you please tell me in the email that was read the sections that you believe are in violation of the charter?
I do not have a copy of that email in front of me. I can't answer that question.
For the most part, I believe that the email was some pretty good advice. Have you talked to your council person? Have you, done this? Have you given them the code? Because it says in the charter that this committee, as an advisory committee, is supposed to be a conduit between the citizens and council, which means they're actually supposed to talk to the citizens. And the citizens are encouraged to talk to them as this committee, and then they determine some issues. So I don't have a problem with them kind of going back and forth with issues of how somebody is handling a problem or what's going on. The concern about whether anybody is filmed or not, they're law enforcement officers, they're a part of our police department. There is no one who is paid by the taxpayer that is exempt from that. If somebody wishes to film, getting their permit, they have every right to in the process of their job, and that is not an interference with it as long as they're not,
officers.
Point of information there. So my comment wasn't about the citizens having the right to record or videotape the police officers. I'm speaking specifically about the committee and Section 32 of Charter. It doesn't have to do with the fact that citizens do have the right to record or videotape if they feel they need to. But I'm speaking specifically about a committee that was appointed by council.
No, I understand that, and we could debate that piece of it, but the citizens, nor I as a council person, give up their rights as a citizen to film an officer. If I were to be stopped, I have every right to film the officer when he's stopping me. I'm still a citizen. Mr. Ward on the Budget Advisory Committee has every right on Nextdoor to answer questions, and a lot of those are his opinion, and some people think he may be speaking for the committee. Who knows? We have people on the Water and Sewer Board that give emails back and forth. So if we're not going to address all of the boards and commissions and how they address the public and try to inform them that once they're on a board or commission, all of a sudden they somehow have reached a status that no longer gives them the same rights as any other citizen as their neighbor, then maybe we need to do a little bit more education piece. But I would disagree with some of that. I think a lot of what they did was pretty good advice in trying to navigate something. Citizens come to you when you're on that board and want some help, and maybe they don't want to go to a council person, and maybe they don't want to go to staff. That's kind of why we designed the board. And in reading what their responsibilities are, they are a conduit for the citizens as well. So I am concerned about this focus on them, especially as an advisory committee, to go ahead and continue to want to put the onus of this kind of stuff on them and pause them, and I'm not for that. I think that when Councilmember Martinez made a good point, when that committee was here, it was obvious, as she pointed out last conversation, that there was some frustration going on. This council didn't address it, and we didn't try to find out what else was going on. So this kind of starts going into this kind of nitpicky piece of it that we're just still dumping on them a little bit without actually ever still hearing from them yet. So I don't think we ought to pause them, and I appreciate the work that they were doing and the attempts in those emails to try to address some of these conversations, along with that they made sure everybody was copied, including the liaisons that sit on council, and I appreciate that transparency.
Councilmember Cuesta.
Thank you. I mean, I don't know how I would say we haven't heard from them. We just heard from them. I think that's one of the few boards we've heard from recently. So it's weird. I don't even know where that suggestion comes from. That's strange to me. They just presented it. And that was the catalyst for a lot of the conflict that arose, was how the meeting unfolded.
Are you asking me, or?
No, I'm not.
Okay,
This is a clear statement. That is what occurred. We just heard from them, and a lot of how that meeting unfolded was what prompted that citizen to go to that first meeting. She was then not allowed to speak at the second one, and so forth. More to Councilmember Sierra's point, and I think this is not so much the email that was sent, but within the code, and this is under Title 2, Chapter 10, or the inverse, Chapter 2, Title 10, but this is the CEAC code. Establish enforcement priorities for city staff to follow to assure protection of the community. That to me almost says they're directing city staff, if you were to read that language just as it exists. And I think maybe that's something that you're alluding to, City Attorney. The same exists in the bylaws. I think the language is written very, very poorly, and it maybe speaks to some of those conflicts that you've come across. And it's way easier to edit the bylaws than it is the code. I don't even know what we do about some of this language. And this is just one particular board. I wouldn't be surprised if this runs the gamut through several others as well. I would actually say the biggest thing that struck me about the email was it just struck me as curt, more than anything else. This is supposed to be a cooperative group. Everybody is really working towards solutions, and to me, that's what struck me. Now, is that a reason to pause a board or move anybody? I'm not sure. I wouldn't lean that way, but it didn't, more than anything else, I wasn't sure if it was, it had a cooperative tone. But I mean, the crux of this with me is the language. And this is what we discussed last time. I'm not sure if there's clear guidance in the code nor the bylaws that we can say, here's the certain universal rule. I think that there's too many contradictory statements in it. Thank you.
agree with a lot of what's been said in terms of the need to review and revise the guidelines for this and other boards and or commissions so that we don't get into another situation like this. I think things should be clearer, and we've mentioned this even a year ago that we need to spend some time updating quite a bit of documentation. So not new, we've had a lot on our plate, but I think the recent incidents do bring the need, the urgency a little bit more before us. A lot of us speak to only the constituents and how the reason we're here is because of our constituents and to support them and represent them. And in that vein, I would say that I received several emails from several constituents that are concerned about sort of the residual, perhaps, of not having the clear guidelines and not really knowing what the role is. It seems to me that CEA does feel that they are there to advise the hired employees in the city administration, which surprised me, but what Mr. Quest just read seems to suggest that as well. So I think we need to review it, but citizens are pointing out that the frightening nature of what's resulting now and the lack of productivity and destructive behavior, communication with citizens, the reputation of that committee now that this is happening, it's continued. So to protect everyone involved, to EAC, to us, our citizens, everybody, just, I think a pause won't hurt. We can take some time, review, revise, meet, discuss, come back together, and this isn't permanent. But I do think a pause so that things don't worsen. My concern is that things will worsen because it didn't just happen once, this difficulty in meeting, and that there was that meeting held here when there was tremendous difficulty and the storming out. It's just, something needs to be fixed, and I think a little time can't hurt that. So I'm in favor of pausing it.
Councilmember Sierra, do you mind if I let Mayor Pro Tem go proceed as well? Mayor Pro Tem.
In all fairness to that committee, they did discuss that email. I don't know about the rest of you, but when I send emails, they are short and to the point. They answer the question. If somebody reads it that wasn't the intended recipient, it may seem curt. But that email came up. The person that wrote that email explained it, and it made perfect sense. It was very timely. It had to do with documentation. I believe that that committee has been here, but they have not been here to be questioned about the things that they are being called on the carpet for right now. And if you're shutting down this committee because they have bylaws that conflict with the charter, we need to shut them all down. This has become more public. The last meeting was absolutely fine according to the bylaws. The committee is getting along fine. I am totally against shutting this committee down without calling them forward to either give them direction or to give them an opportunity to explain their side of the story. We are walking on dangerous ground. It's very troublesome to me that we have new council members that haven't sat on boards for very long, looking at these things. I've been on this board for 3 years, and I've been on other boards. Boards struggle, and they need help, and they need direction. They don't need, well, we're going to shut you down until you guys can get it straightened out. It's not their problem. We need to figure out what we want to do and move forward. And like Councilmember Benz did say, a year ago this came up and it got put on the back burner because there's so many other things. That's not their fault. That's not any other council or committee's fault. That's this council's fault because we haven't made it a priority.
Okay. Do we have, you've been here longer than I have on council, Mayor Pro Tem, do we have other instances where a board or commission denied a citizen the opportunity to speak or participate in a meeting or try to have them escorted out, or has anything risen to this level? Because I think that's why this is happening. Not so much that committees are struggling with bylaws or bylaws need to be revised, but has there been a history of things getting to this point to where a
I don't
citizen's...
believe all committees, I don't believe that all committees have the opportunity for public comment. This committee
Many
does.
of them do. So among the ones that do we know historically if people have
Well,
been
I
told
wouldn't
not
know
to
if I'm not sitting on those committees. I believe we have.
I guess I want to, because we could get this, can you just answer? Have you been on a committee that?
The answer to your question is yes, it's happened. So I have not been on a committee.
Thank you. All right, Council.
Do I still have the floor? She asked for a point of information.
She did, and you answered, no, you haven't. I'd like
But
to
I
move.
was not done when she interrupted me.
I think she's letting you continue.
I am.
think she's
Go
letting you.
ahead.
I'm sorry, I apologize.
Go ahead.
What is,
Is that the one that was making the noise? Sorry, public, we have this microphone thing making chippery noises here. Go ahead, Mayor
so
Pro Tem.
all I was going to say is there are reasons for what happened. Are they right? No. This council has made issues that have happened here, maybe not exactly like that. We deal with those issues and we move on. I believe this whole thing was a learning process for that board, that the whole thing operated correctly. At the first meeting, there was a discussion about whether to let this citizen speak or not. The board overruled, and the meeting went on according to Bob's Rules of Order. They operated according to the rules that we have on the books. The second meeting, I was not there at the beginning, but it is obvious that the interruption took place before the meeting was ever called to order. So, but I don't know. Like I said, I was not there. I'm just saying, I think that we need to think about this. I do think there are things that we need to address, but it's not only because of this board, it is because of every board.
Councilmember Cuesta.
I'm going to pass for now. Thank you.
Councilmember Martinez.
Thank you. This is troubling for all the reasons that have been mentioned previously, and has been for several months now. And I have never experienced issues with any board or commission like this since I've been on council as a liaison, and also before I was on council as members of two boards and commissions. So this is troubling. It's the first time I've seen it bubble up to this level, and people are really emotional and upset about it. And I think we need to do something about this. And right now, we can't push it off anymore. We need to do whatever we can to help Code Enforcement Advisory Committee be their most effective, and so council can be our most effective as well. We've spent now how many parts of study sessions talking about this, and we have a lot on our plates too. So I think we need to do what we can to help work through this, and we need to obviously clean up the code and the bylaws so it's clear, everyone's clear what the roles are, what the roles are not. And so with that, I will be supportive of a pause for 1 to 2 months, which is only 1 to 2 meetings, to help get that all hammered out so that the Code Enforcement Advisory Committee can be its most effective.
Thank you. Councilmember Sear.
So again, I just want to reiterate, I was not talking ill about the entire contents of the email. The education aspect of that email was fine with me. It was just the 2 points of recording and videotaping the code enforcement officers and going directly against charter. How many times have we mentioned charter tonight? Like, it's come up plenty of times whether or not that conforms to charter. And so again, it's just the fact that, you know, council shall deal with the administrative service solely and directly through the city manager, and neither the council, its members, nor committee shall either dictate the appointment or direct or interfere with the work of any officer. That is the problem that I had with that email. Those 2 points. Everything else in there I felt was okay. It was perfect to ask that of any citizen to get additional information about the process and procedures that would help the advisory committee. So that was my point of contention for that email. Regarding the Nextdoor's post, I actually agree with Member Barentine that my concern with posting on Nextdoor potentially could be an open meetings law violation, in the sense that if there's multiple members of a committee answering emails or posting on a site, that potentially is a meetings law violation. So that is part of what I would like to identify during the pause, is whether or not there's other issues that we need to be examining so we don't have this issue again.
All right, I haven't spoken. I'm the one who suggested a pause, and I'm sure there's some people who really want to upset with me for that. To me, a pause is not a shutting it down. A pause is a reset. This group of people has the right to operate well. And whatever we're doing, whatever our interpretation and differences of opinions about the charter and the code and the way in which it's interpreted for this committee is at odds right now. We are at odds with it in various places. They have, to honor them, we ought to make sure we're clear about what it is. I read being a conduit much differently, but I have 9 years of experience where it's never someone going out and videotaping our code officers and suggesting that citizens do, because then they'd get it all on tape, and it sounds like we're trying to trip up people. That's not my goal. I would certainly hope that their goal, which I bet their intended goal is, but may not be coming off like this, is finding out where things are going wrong so we can rectify them, which is what I think that the Code Advisory Committee is supposed to be about. I have talked to a number of people who have sat on this committee in the past to say, what has it been like? And many have said, over my short time even, that it's unclear sometimes. This commission in particular, it's unclear. How are they really supposed to do something? And it doesn't surprise me that we have some people on there that really want to get something done, so they're charging forward on some things, but it's unclear from what we've given them and the way it's been set up as to exactly what that looks like. And maybe some of this language written, so long ago, act as a conduit, I would see as, bringing forward to us what they're hearing, but not going out and constantly different things that are being said about that you've already heard. I'm concerned about unclear roles, an unclear mandate for them as to what it is. And so in the lack of understanding, you fill in with what you think it should be, especially when you see a problem. And I think that code has been something that's risen to the surface for a number of reasons, starting this summer with the flood and with many other things that have gone on over the course of years. So that's one. And the second is, and I think they've addressed it really. I did listen to the whole meeting, the last one. I've listened to 4 or 5 now, just to go back in time to see what the tenor's like in the meeting, how they've handled things. And there's obvious misunderstanding. It's not their fault on some things. I don't think they knew, they didn't intend to break the open meetings law, I doubt. But they did, but what's the recourse of that? Well, we tell them that they did. So, and we outline better for all of our committees. When does that happen? Budget Advisory Committee, I remember when they first started out, they really got really clear about when they were breaking the open meetings law or not, and set up some clear ideas about how to email one another. Not all committees are aware and do that, but they had very aware people on it. So I'm concerned about the issue primarily of what is their role, what should they be doing. They're supposed to be doing a comprehensive view of the municipal ordinances intended to prevent abuse situations. What does that really mean? And it seems like it's supposed to somewhat come from us, giving them a charge for some things, but we haven't been telling them, hey, we want you to work on this. Last time we did that is when we asked them to work on chickens, and another time pot bellies, and another time, I can't remember what the other issue is. We haven't done that for a long time, given them direction on what we think. So my pause in my mind is it's not punitive. I know that you think that it is, some of you. That's not the intent. The intent is to be adults, figure out this isn't quite working right. We've had a number of phone calls and people emailing about their nervousness about this committee and what it's doing. I don't want to get anybody into any difficult situation. So I would prefer to reset what it's about, make sure we're all clear what we want, maybe change the language a bit in this to make sure we're all on the same page, and try and do something which is right by our citizens, which is supposed to be an advisory committee that helps us understand how we're moving forward on code. So Councilmember Barentine is next, and then member Questa.
I've had a lot of feedback at my coffees and my meetings that this looks punitive, and that if a committee doesn't do what this council wants, or if there's people on a committee that this council has political issues with, that's what it looks like. That's what I'm getting some feedback for. This ultra focus on this one committee for these issues does look punitive and even slightly political as well. It isn't a fact. He read the charter on exactly what they're supposed to be doing, and the charter says that they arguably are supposed to be directing the code enforcement. I don't think code enforcement or any of our employees or police especially have any problem being filmed in the course of their job, and they should not. That's pretty common practice today, and I think that they want it for their protection as much as the protection of the community, so that there's an accurate record if that's necessary. And that's pretty commonplace to do that.
Councilmember Barrington, I'm going to interrupt you, I'm sorry, but could you add something new to the conversation? We've heard this argument for it, and it's a legitimate one. Is there anything new you'd like to add to the conversation about whether or not to pause them, whether to take Councilmember Sierra's suggestion?
I think that this council already decided not to pause. I think that the mayor didn't like that decision, and we're back at it.
Okay.
And this is not the first time that when something doesn't go a certain way and you have the authority to go ahead and bring it back, and then we keep bringing it back ad nauseum until something gets done, and I don't think we should pause it. The council already had this at a study session. We already made a decision not to pause it, and it seems like we're going to keep nitpicking at them until you get what you want.
Okay.
And
I
hope that's new
Fair,
information
that's fair.
at least.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Cuesta.
You bet. So the language in the code, I didn't think it was that simple. We can't just change code, can we? Because there's a few dozen places I'd like to start if that's the case.
City Attorney, could you give us some advice?
The answer is yes. What the city council does is sets policy through the code, and because the agendas are so full and mostly it's just me who's available to rewrite that, we're not staying up to date on that stuff. The reality is it does appear to me that the code was written in violation of the charter. And yes, you can fix that. And as a matter of fact, I would like to state that if this governing body does decide to do a 2-month pause, that the direction to staff is they want a rewrite of the Code Enforcement Advisory Committee's enabling legislation to bring it back into compliance with charter, and also to make sure that the directives are very clear. I've been very concerned that my office is out of step with Code Enforcement Advisory Committee. And I'm giving you a longer answer than you want, but I have told all the boards and commissions they may not bring ordinances to this council directly, that ordinances come through my office first. And the reason for that is not to shut down communication. The reason is because if poorly written ordinances are brought to the council and the council votes them down because they're poorly written and can't be enforced, it looks like the council isn't supportive of the idea. If they vote in favor because they're supportive of the idea, then they have an unenforceable ordinance. It's not a good situation to put the council in. So ordinances should come through my office first. And the Code Enforcement Advisory Committee has come up with several topics that I think we really need to be looking at. But we don't have the time to do every great idea everybody has. So I need them to get direction from the council on their great ideas, and then the council direct my office to make that a priority and not work on other things, but make these a priority. So there are some conflicts between code and charter that are very clear. There are some policy applications that are very unclear, and I think that they've got great ideas, but we're not able to support those as we should.
And this is just a lack of time, is what I'm hearing correctly.
A lot of my issue is a lack of time, and also I work at the direction of council, not of any committee.
Sure. Understood. If that is the case, that it is just a matter of getting these things in sync and aligning charter with code, it seems to me that it would be it would look singular if we just said we're doing this with code enforcement advisory, and that it really should be pretty broad and touch each one. Now, given you probably can't work each one simultaneously, but I would think we would want to come up with some order in which we review them, because I doubt this is the one. Again, this is risen to the surface, and so I've looked at these bylaws where I haven't looked at every committee and board's bylaws, but I would imagine that there's other points of conflict as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Martinez.
Oh, pardon.
Your arms are longer than mine. Yeah, so I agree with much of what's been said. My question is, if we're paused or resetting, what are the steps? So obviously the first step would be to clean up the code and the language. What other steps might we take during that time?
Would you like to?
I don't know
Okay,
if we
so
thought, I don't know if we thought about it, or
here's-
we're just going to
When
brainstorm.
I think of pause, I think, and I did not, I wasn't sure what Councilmember Sierra was going to do. I just think we need to continue talking about this because it came up again. And I'm not advocating for a pause per se as a reset, and it's fine with me if they meet next month. But I wouldn't want them to be carrying out the kinds of things that they are that could be violating charter, and instead perhaps ask them to look through what's in code and what's in the charter and tell us where they're confused or where they wish that we'd give them some clarity. And maybe they, so I mean, I just think there's some things they can do. I just would want them to stop what they're doing now so we don't get them into a bad place. That would be my perspective.
Okay, and part two of that, to what Councilmember Cuesta mentioned, we do have the boards and commissions come before us once a year. Maybe we do visit on some sort of schedule with the boards and commissions and have these conversations. What's working, where do you need more guidance? Are there issues that in your bylaws that conflict? Maybe we do that at several times a year for each of the groups.
Sure. Actually, we could have all the boards and commissions in the next 2 months, tell them to look at all of their bylaws and codes and tell us where they think it's confusing to them or what they think is inconsistent or even doesn't make sense for the current day. Because some of this stuff was written a long time ago.
Outdated, yeah.
I think, interim city manager, let's let you.
If I may, I just wanted, as director of staff and as an advocate of staff, they are confused, I think, about the role of the Code Enforcement Advisory Committee as well. They very much want to have a collaborative environment, but sometimes it's unclear where the steps are, where the Code Enforcement Advisory is an advocate and when they're supportive of that. So anything that we can do to improve those communications and that collaborative environment, I think would be a very positive step.
Councilmember Wink.
I have a question, thank you, Mayor, for Director Hargrove. Perhaps maybe also, since it was brought up that the staff liaison was receiving direction from the code enforcement chair, I think is what I heard said earlier. So maybe we also re-examine across all boards and commissions the relationships between them and the staff liaisons as well, to see.
That might be healthy, yes.
We can make
From a
sure
staff
everything's
perspective,
clear there
they
as well.
certainly want to know their role.
Thank you.
I appreciate the city attorney bringing up the direction that some of the ordinances are coming, as I've heard from a couple of boards, 2 of our quasi-judicial boards, that they've gotten some feedback from the attorney that those things need to come back from them. And they're not reading it that way. I mean, that's not how they're seeing what their role is. And some of the staff, especially with our quasi-judicial boards as well, kind of circumventing process or not making it clear how the process is for that board or the authority of that board, or whether they're part of that process and not the board. So I think on your point, Mayor, is well taken, that maybe on a larger scale that some of that needs to be re-examined so that the boards are doing the full authority and job that they're supposed to do, and that we're empowering them to do that, and that we never give some kind of impression that if they step out of line that we're going to smack them down when we're not paying attention to all of the issues and problems that are going on with boards if there's some confusion. So I think a look at some of that would be a good idea. I believe when the Planning and Zoning Board came and talked to us, they brought up some serious issues, and we really never we really never vetted those, and so all that ends up happening is that it kind of ends up festering. So I would like to make sure, and also to look at the staff role as well. I have listened to meetings where there have been comments made about council members and process and policies and discussions that happened at council that were inappropriate. And so we need to make sure that everybody's role is defined on how we're supposed to be handling these things, because they're very serious issues. So.
Didn't, and this is directed to the city attorney, didn't boards and commissions in the last year, really since Bob's rules, weren't they all kind of given the direction to look at their bylaws and things like that? And has that all been compiled, or?
They were all given those directions, and unfortunately over the last year we've had a lot of staff shift. So we just don't have staff to keep up with all the things we would like to do. I think I've spoken to you about the boards and commissions policies that we told all the boards and commissioners that we thought we'd have out by last February. I've just sent what I hope is a final draft to the city manager for her final review, so we can get that out to council to review. I think that will help a lot, because I don't think boards and commissioners understand that they are subject to the open meetings law. When they're made a volunteer on a board, they have a role of the city where they discuss the city's business. And when a quorum of them are discussing whatever the business, for example, Code Enforcement Advisory Committee, if they have the quorum of them discussing it by email, they're violating the open meetings law. And I don't think it's just the Code Enforcement Advisory Committee that might run into that. I think that all boards and commissions need to be reminded annually of these issues. The bylaws, I think 2 or 3 committees rewrote their bylaws, again, trying to bring them into a standard conformance. But honestly, we're just a lot of steps behind.
Right, okay, and then one other thing. I really don't want to pause that committee, but if they truly are our priority, then I think that we would need to make sure that we need to get on the agenda the issues or bylaws or whatever that we want to deal with, make it a priority so it's not stuck out there and never, never. But I really am not. I think we could go ahead and do that and not put them on pause. And I appreciated your suggestions. So.
Councilmember Quest, you had your light on, but did you just, okay. So, what, I mean, there's one thing is not having them meet at all. The other is to let them meet, but have them focus on this and not do anything more that's related to going out and talking to citizens or anything that they're doing, not posting on anywhere, and just really focusing on this while we also have some focus within our staffing for it. That would not be it's not a shutting down. That's never what I intended. It was really to try and create something. And if they could be a part of it, that's helpful. I would love to see some other input by others if we can have it. People have been on things. So I don't know, what do you think about that? Councilmember Wink.
Thank you, Mayor. I believe it's a great idea to, if the committee's open to working on sharing their views and inputs and feedback on the current mandate that's printed. I'm only wondering if we've been having this conversation and we decide, and we don't, the group isn't paused, but the group has their regular meeting, and that meeting, however, is only dedicated toward working through this documentation, but not responding to citizens. I'm worried about a confusion on the part of constituents. It seems like it would be more clean, again, and maybe we can overemphasize and overemphasize and overemphasize that this is not a punitive measure. We're taking 2 steps back so we can go 10 miles down the road. But just, it seems like it would be simplest and clearest, and especially for the constituents. Just 2 months, we'll reconvene in X month,
I'm gonna just go down around and say supportive of one way or another. So member Questa, how would you like to see this play out?
Options one more time, Mayor.
Well, one would be to do a complete pause until, until we can get some attorney work on this and some staffing on it, and other would be to let them continue to meet, but not do any kind of work that they've been traditionally doing, because it may be overstepping some of the boundaries.
I mean, I don't want to discount the matter that there's probably the third choice.
There
too,
might
which
be,
is
if you
that
can
they-
come up
they
with
can-
one.
That they continue, that, they continue work in progress.
Yeah, that's true. That's
and
another
I don't
word.
want to not have that as the option. The pause, I don't feel that we have clear directive on, here's how we're going to resolve this in the next 2 months. I feel that pause, it's an idea that I don't see how we get to the end of the road, have a clearly defined, here's our end of the road on that. Having them meet and just discuss the matters at hand, it strikes me, I feel like we're in a place that I assume no committee has really been before. Have we done this before with the committee where we say, you guys meet, but you don't discuss any matters that are your purview, and you just discuss what is wrong with code? And that's, I mean, I feel like we're getting in a really weird place with this particular board. I mean, I'll tell you, truth be told, I got a full court press today on this particular committee. I'm still leaning towards they continue their work as it is, and with the very clear guidance of our liaisons, in that we resolve these matters as we move forward.
Councilmember Martinez.
Thank you.
I'm not sure of the specifics they're working on, or if they have deadlines that they're already working on, like maybe for the Citizen Magazine or Citizen Outreach or things like that. But I would prefer to not just maybe divert them to talk about something else and just totally just pause for the moment. But I agree that we need to flesh out what we're going to accomplish during this reset period, so that it's clear to us, it's clear to the citizens, it's clear to the group members what this is going to look like, and then we can set some deadlines and make sure that we're on a path to make this better.
Councilmember Sierra.
So I think I was clear that I am for a pause. And from the sound of the city attorney, it sounds like we can get this done pretty quickly, within a 1 or 2 month time frame. I think you said 2 months was the comment that you mentioned. But I think there are specific boundaries and the scope of the committee that we do need to outline within that time. I am not okay with the videotaping of police officers when they're in the role of a committee. If they're a citizen, they have that right, but as a committee, I'm not okay with that. So that's where I stand.
Thank you. Councilmember Barentine.
I sat on the Code Enforcement Advisory Council as the liaison in 2003, and I attended meetings before you became the liaison as a member of the public, for as much as apparently I'm allowed to be still a member of the public. This is one of the best boards that I've seen function in the capacity that they are. This board has been used in the past, unfortunately, for some political maneuvering, and I think that this board really has a very sincere effort to try and follow the charter and do the job that they're supposed to do. And their job, as it says in our charter right now, is that they're supposed to direct employees, and they're supposed to go ahead and get information from citizens. We can tweak this a little, but I think a lot is being made out of nothing for some other reasons that are going on. I'm very disappointed in that. I am not for pausing this. I want them to continue their work. I had a woman, 81 years old, call me for a snow issue, and the reason she called me was because of the hard work that this board did to go ahead and put information into the Citizen Magazine, and she knew exactly what the rules were and for the snow, and wanted to make sure that she could, as calmly as possible, have an issue with her neighbor resolved. And she pointed to the article. She had cut it out, along with who she was supposed to contact. I've talked to a majority of this board, and they get along better than we do. They like each other, they respect each other, and they get along. And I am going to defer on the side of that this is a bunch of volunteer citizens that are doing a good job, that respect each other, have conversations with each other, disagree with each other, and are still able to like each other and function together. And I think that they're doing a great job. So absolutely not. I don't want to pause them.
All right. I think some of the comments that you just made, Councilmember Barentine, have pushed me over the edge to say maybe we do need a pause, a reset time, and let's set it for a 6-week period if we can get it, and partly because I think that we're okay with violating charter to the level that we are when we're involved with the police officers and videotaping really concerns me that we don't see that as an issue.
Point of order, videotaping an officer is not a violation of the charter.
It is not, but if that is not the role of a council-appointed committee to go out and do that, that is not their role. Anyone can do it, I can do it, we all can do it, but that's not our role. So I would like to, if it is the role, then let's say it.
Don't put it in the frame that they're violating the charter. That's all I'm asking for, the point of clarification. It's not a violation of the charter.
Violating charter in what was presented earlier is what I'm talking about, and that role of going out and doing what they're doing is not a helpful way to go about it. It isn't. So
helpful, I agree. Thank you for rephrasing. It may not be helpful, but it's not a violation of the charter.
So it was my time to talk, and this happens a lot. This happens a lot, Councilmember Barentine. I think we take a pause. We've got 4 people who, and we can talk about it at the regular meeting if we need to make a decision, if that feels better for everybody to, again, have it in there. But I would assume we have a directive to ask staff without needing to go in there.
We will put it on next Monday's agenda for a motion. Okay. And we'll make sure that there is something clearly stating what staff believes it can do within a 6 to 8 week period, and the role of CAC in helping us do that.
Great, and that means any of us can decide on a different way to think of this, even a 4th way between now and then, which I welcome. Next up is council members' choice. Let's start with Councilmember Sierra.
No, nothing tonight.
Councilmember Barentine.
We have the public parking regulations. I had a constituent call me, got a notification from Officer Reed, and he referenced a public parking regulations that are, in my understanding, not true, as he was going back and referencing the citizen initiative that was passed that somehow made it impossible for our Inglewood Police Department to go ahead and address a car parked over 72 hours on a public street. Since I was one of the authors of that, I can tell you that that has absolutely nothing to do with any public property. It was only private property that addressed, and so I'm a little confused. So if I could get some feedback or understanding on why that's being provided, I can certainly provide it to the city attorney or to the city manager. I'll give it to you. Okay. And the email back and forth about, and then saying that there wasn't anything they could do because of the citizen initiative that was passed. It had nothing to do, it didn't have anything to do with public property. So maybe we could get a little clarification on that. The DDA that we got in the council request from Councilmember Martinez, I would hope that everybody would has read that, but I would also like the council as part of that process for this downtown development authority, which is similar to an urban renewal authority. It has a lot of the same domain and ability to TIF and divert taxpayer money away with developments. I would like some history information on the Trolley Square so that the previous downtown development authority documents are provided to us, and what happened with that combination between the DDA that we had, why it failed, and what happened with any of the money or funds at that time, so that we have, including with Ricker Cunningham, what happened with Trolley Square, because we had both an urban renewal and a downtown DDA at the time. So if we could get that information. And then we did the, oh, and then the financial loss, issue that came up, I looked over those documents, and it does look like Vicki Hoffman, when she brought up that our investments are losing about, $300,000 to $400,000 on a regular basis for our reporting periods. The documents that I kind of looked at that she had done in her request, it does look like we're losing some money. So I would like to get some, and I know that Councilmember Sierra had asked about this as well. So if we could get a little bit of a update on the investments and what's going on. If that is inaccurate, then somebody could just point it out, and we'll all be the smarter for it. And if it is that we're losing money, then we need to decide to reinvest differently. Public parking, and then the missing employees one. So that I was concerned when they said that there were that many employees that were kind of leaving, and all of a sudden it came to my attention over these last couple of weeks that several more employees have left, and I would like to know how we're going to be notified when we have somebody, especially somebody who's in a director position who's on an extended leave, that somehow council be notified without violating anybody's medical leave or HIPAA stuff. But we still should know that somebody isn't here. And if somebody is no longer in a position, and I'm telling somebody to call somebody, and then I've got somebody calling me back going, they got fired. That doesn't make me look very good, that I'm telling somebody this is the person who's handling this, talk to them, or this is how you go through this process, and then find out that the person is no longer here. So if we could have some kind of regular communication so that we're made aware of who our staff is and who our employees are, I think that would be a good thing for us and the community. And that's all that I have.
Point of information, which director are you speaking of?
The chief of police.
Oh.
Okay, because I bring that up as an example because that was one that got brought to my attention by the public, and then found out that he had already been out for 4 weeks prior to that without the council knowing, and would be until the end of this month. So just a regular chain of command or communication. Thanks.
Mayor Portem.
The question I have is, has GovHR, that's who we chose, right? Have they been notified?
Yes, they have.
And can we have an update, or do you not have one yet?
Well, the motion to approve their contract will be before you February 4th, next Monday night, and we're waiting for their final signature on the contract we proposed.
Okay, thank you. That's it.
Anything else? Councilmember Wink?
Nothing from me.
You bet, thank you. To the finances that came up in the city's portfolio, I read that a little bit differently. Two folks made statements regarding we suffered losses in 2018, and according to the information we were given, the funds were held in lower securities, 59 million of them, which yielded a 1.6% return, and then the remaining 27 million yielded 2.48. So I don't expect these investments to gain every day. These are financial markets, but on the year they both gained money, and so I think this is worth having a more broad discussion on it, just so everybody has an understanding of where these markets are and where our investments are as well. Because the information I was presented comes across differently than the understanding of others, so I think it'd be good if we got onto the same page there. The next one was the Museum of Art's lease. Have we heard back from them on that yet?
Thank you. I just received a letter from the museum last week, and I'm
Outdoor Arts, excuse me.
Yeah,
Pardon.
Outdoor Arts. And we'll copy that. They've decided they don't want to change the lease at this point. So I will include that in the council packet so you all have that definite documentation.
Am I to understand they accepted our terms?
No, they did not.
Oh, they will not be, they're discontinuing their lease?
No, they don't want to.
So they're just saying that they don't accept our terms?
Well, no,
Let her finish.
they're as, and that's what I was going to write and put together so we'd have that. Their current lease goes through 2020. Which was the idea. Their original suggestion is that they wanted to renegotiate it, but they have decided not to do so.
So at this time as it stands?
Yes.
Okay. They're out at 2020?
Correct.
Okay. Very good, thank you. There is the manner of the house at 4888 Washington, and you provided some information. It sounds like there's a few things in motion, and so I will, I'll wait to see how those unfold, but I do appreciate you folks providing some more information there. And the final one was that I got it, in the time that we were speaking of the courses that were offered by community development regarding understanding the comprehensive plan, it sounds as though the links are broken. So I can get the links fixed as well. Awesome, thank you.
You were looking for them, or someone's already contacted you to say that?
Yeah,
Okay.
you can, if you check your email as these meetings are going on, people,
Yeah.
people get, I had about 5 heads up that the sound wasn't well this afternoon.
Me too.
Oh, I got up.
I'm not sure about everybody else.
All right, Councilmember Martinez.
Just thanks to the city staff for putting together all of our council requests. I know there's a lot, and we got a real big juicy one this time, so thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate the conversations tonight. I think we've got some great ideas on how to do some restructuring of our meetings a bit to make them a little bit more efficient. I agree with Councilmember Cuesta that in light of the way in which people do read the finances and the losses, it's always surprising to me. It's just quite, we all read budgets differently and have different past experiences. So I think for the sake of making it really clear to all of us and how it's being interpreted and how it's being used, it'd be good to put it on at some point where we can in study session and try and get on the same page.
Could I ask
Yes.
a question?
Go ahead.
Would that be appropriate for a regular monthly financial report and make that a pointed topic, or would you like it to be a separate topic?
Oh, I would love it like that if we always could do a little bit of that. But I think that's part of the problem is that we read it on the day and think, oh my goodness, and we don't realize over time how this works. Some people just are not very finance oriented and haven't dealt with big budgets like that.
But we could, at the next monthly financial report, provide additional information to address this, or if you'd like it in the council request in a written form. That's kind of what I mean.
Do you want it? You don't want it?
Oh, okay.
Finances fluctuate, I don't, I mean.
There are people, since I brought this up, there are people who are pretty financially savvy, but if it's being handled different, or you believe that it's more of an overtime thing, then maybe for one time we could go ahead and have a little bit more in-depth piece of it and have it separate, and then maybe to what the mayor is asking for, have it be a little piece of financials in the future, but at least for some piece of it, it's got to be a little better explained. We're talking to people who aren't exactly financially ignorant, and if it's being handled differently, if this is different, then maybe we can explain it so that they have a level of.
That's fine, thank you.
Continue with that. I'm not saying anybody's financially ignorant. It tends to be, Councilmember Barentine, it's not helpful when you do that. It's just not helpful. I'm saying that we all have different experiences with finances. In saying, that is not what I'm saying is people are ignorant. We all have different.
I don't know what
we
I did that
all
wasn't
have
helpful.
different,
I apologize.
We all have different perspectives on how finances work and have different ways that we look at it. I think it would be well in everyone's interest to have some time that's devoted to this to make sure we understand how it's.
It would be nice to know what I'm being called on the cover
She didn't
for.
say the words ignorance. She said people have different ways of interpreting or something, and you said, well, some of us think people are ignorant, so you put words in her mouth.
Exactly what it is, and that's the end of the
happens
conversation, okay?
often.
So I just would like to have it. I don't know, let's try a monthly one and see what happens. When was our, it seems like we haven't done a budget one in a.
We'll get updated with end of the year.
Okay, great. The one thing that Councilmember, I think Martinez might have brought up is, or maybe it was Wink, about council requests and having a better format. You talked about we used to have these tablets that we had at our, in there and here, that we just would write things up and hand them to the city manager all the time. That became archaic, and people were writing notes on them rather than doing council requests, and so staff stopped doing that. But if there is a way that you think we can collect these in a more efficient way, and you're thinking of it, let us know, and we can send it out to you all, and you can say, yeah, I think that would be a better way. But otherwise, I just think we need to shoot emails towards the city manager. And one of the things that I think we've told her, and Director Kemp said this before too, she will let us know if it's going to take a while, so that we don't expect it the next day, because some things do take a lot longer. And hopefully we've given her the voice to do that. Yeah. I think that's it for now. Interim City Manager.
No additional report, thank you.
City Attorney. I have no report. All right, we are adjourned. We will see you Monday night. Drive safely home.
9:30. Not bad.
Yeah, it's supposed to be 8:30.